You become aware of the darkness in the small stone chamber adjoining the Mews long before any light touches the narrow window. The awareness does not arrive as a sudden jolt, but as a slow gathering of sensation, a gradual return to the surface from a deep, dreamless sleep that has left no residue behind. You lie completely still on the straw mattress, your body heavy and warm beneath the wool blanket, and you do not yet open your eyes because there is nothing to see in the blackness that fills the room. The air is cool against your face, carrying a dry scent of old straw, seasoned wood, and the faint, clean trace of bird that is always present in this part of the castle, a smell so familiar it is almost a comfort. The silence around you is so complete that it feels like a soft pressure against your ears, a silence made of thick stone walls and heavy timber doors, and the deep hush of the hour before dawn. Somewhere far beyond the castle walls a single rooster calls from the village, its cry muffled and distant, barely more than a suggestion of sound that rises and falls away again into nothing. That distant call confirms what your body already knows. The night is ending. The day's first tasks are approaching, but there is no hurry at all. You lie there and let the sensations of the bed hold you. The straw mattress beneath you is firm and slightly uneven, shaped by months of sleeping in the same position, and you feel the faint prickle of the ticking fabric through the linen sheet. The wool blanket is pulled up to your chin, its weight a steady pressure that feels as reliable as the stone walls themselves. Your breathing is slow and deep, your chest rising and falling in a rhythm that matches the quiet pulse of the sleeping fortress around you, and you notice the way the air passes cool over your upper lip and warm as it leaves your nostrils. Your cheek rests against the pillowcase, a rough spun linen that smells of the lavender sprigs stored in the linen chest, and the slight scratch of the fabric is a grounding point in the darkness. You are not thinking about anything in particular, not planning the day or recalling dreams or worrying about duties. Your mind is as still as the room, open and empty and calm. The falcons will be stirring soon in the mews beyond the far wall, rustling their feathers and adjusting their talons on the wooden perches. But for now, even they are silent. You become aware of the shape of the room around you, even with your eyes still closed. This chamber is small and square, carved into the thickness of the inner curtain wall, and you know every corner of it without needing to look. The ceiling beams are low and dark with age, heavy oak trunks that have been blackened by centuries of smoke from tallow candles and the faint breath of countless winters. The stone floor is covered with a scattering of rushes that whisper faintly when the air shifts, and there is a small wooden stool near the bed, a table against the far wall, and a single narrow window set high in the stone, shuttered now against the night. On the table rests a clay pitcher and a basin, their shapes soft in the darkness, and on a wooden peg beside the door your tunic and hood hang waiting. Each object in the room is still, resting in its own patient silence, and you feel no need to disturb any of them yet. You are simply present, a quiet consciousness floating in the warm cocoon of the bed, and the minutes pass without being counted. The darkness is not completely uniform. As your eyes adjust, you begin to perceive the faintest difference in the quality of the blackness near the window. The shutters do not fit perfectly, and a thread of the outside world seeps through the narrow gap, not yet light, but a suggestion of less dark, a thinning of the night that speaks of the sky beginning its slow turn toward grey. You watch that tiny seam of not quite blackness, with the same detached attention you might give to a slow-moving cloud. There is no impatience to see it change, only a quiet observation of the fact that it exists. The rooster calls again, or perhaps a different one, and this time the sound is followed by a deeper silence that seems to press even more gently against the walls. You feel the weight of the blanket on your chest and the slight coolness at the edge of the pillow where your hand has crept out from under the covers, and you notice the temperature difference between the air on your skin and the warmth trapped beneath the wool. These small details are the only landmarks in a landscape of perfect stillness. Time passes in the way it passes in deep night or early morning, elastic and unmeasured, marked only by the slow cycle of your breath and the barely perceptible shift of the darkness toward something lighter. You think, without urgency, about the day ahead, not as a list of tasks, but as a gentle unfolding of familiar motions that you have performed hundreds of times before. The goshawk will need her hood removed and her morning portion. The peregrine will be weighed on the small balance scale. The merlin's perch will need fresh sand, and the mews floor will need sweeping. But these thoughts are distant, hazy, without edges, drifting through your mind like leaves on a still pond. You do not hold on to any of them or try to arrange them in order, because the order is already known, stored deep in your muscles and bones, requiring no conscious effort. The training flight, if the weather holds, will happen in the enclosed garden where the chamomile grows wild, and the records will be written in the vellum book with the quill that needs trimming. All of this is waiting for you beyond the door, but none of it is calling you yet. A faint sound reaches you now, not from outside but from within the castle itself, the distant creak of a timber settling, or the soft scuff of a night watchman's boots on the stone stairs far away. It is so muffled by the thick walls that it might be imagined a half-heard thing that blurs the line between the real and the dreamed. You listen without straining, letting the sound pass, and the silence that follows is even deeper than before. The straw in the mattress shifts under you as you adjust your shoulders a fraction of an inch, a tiny movement that you make without thinking, and the rustle it produces is the loudest sound in the room. You feel the scratch of the pillowcase against your cheek again, the same texture as before, and you realize that your awareness of your own body is becoming sharper, more defined as the minutes pass. Your feet are warm under the blanket, your fingers lightly curled near your chin, and your eyelids are heavy, but no longer sealed by sleep. You could open them now, but there is no reason to, not yet. The darkness continues its slow retreat, and the seam of grey at the window shutters widens almost imperceptibly, shifting from a thin line to a soft blur that begins to hint at the shape of the shutter itself. The world outside is taking its first cautious breath, and you can feel that change in the quality of the silence, which is now a little less dense, a little more expectant. Another distant rooster call, this one slightly closer, perhaps from the castle's own small poultry yard near the outer gatehouse, and its sound is clearer, more definite, a thin golden thread of noise that rises and falls, and then is gone. You notice that your breathing has changed without your permission, becoming slightly shallower, more awake, and you accept this as a sign that the time for lying still is approaching its natural end, though you do not rush toward it. There is a small simple pleasure in this in-between state, this threshold between sleep and action, and you allow yourself to remain in it a little longer. Your mind drifts now to the birds, as it always does in these quiet moments before rising. You picture them in the mews, each one hooded and still on its perch, their feathers sleek and their heads tucked slightly into their shoulders. The goshawk, a large female with deep orange eyes that you have never seen in full daylight without the calm precision of her gaze meeting yours, will be standing on one foot with the other tucked up into her breast feathers, a posture of complete rest. The peregrine, a younger male with slate blue plumage, will be near the ventilation slit where the freshest air moves, even with his eyes covered. The merlin, small and quick, will be fluffed slightly against the night chill. You know these birds as well as you know your own hands, each one's weight and temperament and the tiny variations in their daily health, and the thought of them is a steadying presence, a quiet anchor in the drifting sea of early morning. You feel no anxiety about them, no worry about their condition, because you checked everything the evening before, and you will check everything again soon. This is simply the natural direction of your thoughts, the gentle pull of your purpose. A new sound enters the stillness, the very first note of a songbird somewhere in the castle garden, a thin tentative call that repeats twice and then stops as if the bird itself is not yet sure that dawn is truly coming. You listen to the silence that follows and find it altered by that small sound, somehow more awake than before. The grey of the shutters is now a definite presence, a pale rectangle that outlines the window frame, and you can just make out the darker shape of the crossbar against it. The room begins to reveal itself in the faintest possible way, the bulk of the table separating from the wall, the curve of the picture becoming a suggestion of form rather than a complete absence. You can now open your eyes and see the space you inhabit, and the thought of doing so drifts across your mind without urgency. There is still no need to move, no bell ringing, no master calling. The only clock is the light and your own internal rhythm, which has always been reliable. You shift your legs under the blanket, feeling the pleasant stretch of muscles that have been still for hours, and you flex your toes against the sheet, a small private movement that no one sees. The stone walls of the chamber are cool to the touch, and you know from countless mornings that the air outside the blanket will be cold enough to raise goosebumps on your arms. You consider that future cold with the same detachment with which you consider the light, a simple fact that will be dealt with when the time comes. The blanket is warm and heavy, and you are not yet ready to leave it, but the distance between readiness and action is slowly closing. You think of the water in the pitcher, how it will feel cool but not cold against your face, drawn fresh from the well last evening, and you think of the rough linen cloth beside the basin that you will use to pat your skin dry. You think of your woolen tunic hanging on its peg, its familiar weight, and the way it smells faintly of lanolin and the Mews, and you know that putting it on will be the first real step into the day. But not yet. Not quite yet. The songbird tries its call again, this time joined by a second voice, and the two exchange a few tentative notes before falling silent. Outside the castle walls, the village is still asleep, but the fields and hedgerows are beginning to stir with the small anonymous sounds of living things that welcome the dawn. You imagine the mist lying low over the meadow beyond the outer curtain, a white blanket of cold air that will burn off when the sun finally rises, and you imagine the grass heavy with dew, each blade holding a tiny crystal drop. The training flight will take place in the enclosed garden where the apple tree grows, and the grass there will be wet underfoot, soaking into the leather of your boots as you stand and watch the goshawk circle. That moment is still hours away, but it exists already in your mind, a calm future event that will unfold exactly as it always does, without surprise or variation. You find a deep comfort in that predictability, in the knowledge that today will be like yesterday and like tomorrow, a slow wheel turning through the same gentle motions. The grey at the window is now touched with the faintest hint of colour, a dilution so subtle that you cannot name it, not quite yellow and not quite rose, just a warming of the pale. You know that this means the sun is approaching the horizon somewhere beyond the hills, still hidden, but sending its first messengers ahead. You have seen this transition 1,000 times, and it never fails to settle something in your chest, a quiet acknowledgement of the world's slow, reliable turning. You are simply a small part of that turning, a falconer in a castle Mews, and your place in the order of things is as fixed as the stones themselves. This thought is not a grand one. It passes through your mind as lightly as the songbird's call, leaving no trace behind. You are still lying on the straw mattress, still warm beneath the blanket, and the day is still waiting for you with infinite patience. You become aware of a slight chill on the tip of your nose, the one part of your face that is exposed to the air, and you register it as a minor discomfort that you will remedy when you rise. The chill is a reminder that the fire in the small brazier in the corner has long since burned down to cold ash, and you will need to stir the embers and add a few sticks of kindling before the Mews work begins, though the birds do not need warmth the way a human does. That task sits in the back of your mind, a small stone in a quiet stream, and you let it rest there. Your breathing has become even and deliberate now, not the slow rhythm of sleep, but the measured cadence of a person who's fully conscious and choosing to remain still. Your eyes are still closed, the darkness behind your lids now touched by the grey light that must be filling the room, and you feel the gentle pressure of your lashes against your cheeks. A door closes somewhere deep in the castle, a solid thud that travels through the stone like a low heartbeat, and you know that the kitchen servants are beginning their day. The baker will be stoking the great oven, the scullery maids will be drawing water from the inner well, and the first tendrils of wood smoke will soon be rising from the kitchen chimney to drift across the bailey. These sounds and smells are not yet here in your chamber, but they are on their way, moving through the corridors and stairwells like a slow tide. You are still separate from it all, still wrapped in the quiet of your own small room, and you feel no rush to join the waking household. Your role begins with the birds, not with the kitchen, and the birds do not need you until the light is stronger. So you remain where you are, suspended in the last of the dark. You think now about the leather glove that hangs on a hook just inside the Mews door, the thick one with the reinforced cuff that has been shaped by years of gripping a falcon's legs. You will slide your hand into it soon, feeling the smooth lining and the cool weight of the leather, and the goshawk will step onto your fist with the same careful placement of talons that she has performed 1,000 times. You think about the small wooden bowls you carved last winter, the ones you used to hold the cut meat during feeding, their surfaces worn to a soft polish from your hands and the wash water. You think about the ink pot on the desk, the way the oak gall ink smells sharp and earthy, and the scratch of the quill against the vellum page. All these thoughts move through your mind without connection, each one a separate, quiet image that rises and fades like a bubble in still water. There is no narrative to them, no story being told, just the gentle drift of a mind that has nothing to fix upon. The straw in the mattress crinkles faintly as you shift your weight again, this time turning slightly onto your side, so that you face the window. Your movement is slow and unhurried, and when you settle into the new position you feel the blanket adjust around your shoulders, tucking itself into the curve of your body. The grey light is now bright enough that you can see it through your closed eyelids, a pale wash that replaces the complete blackness of before. You know that if you opened your eyes you would see the window shutters clearly, the grain of the wood and the iron hinge, and the table with its pitcher and basin, and the peg with your tunic. You know the exact colours you would see, the warm brown of the wood, the pale grey of the stone, the dark green of the wool tunic, the dull red clay of the pitcher. But for now you keep your eyes closed, preserving the soft inner world of half sleep for just a few more moments, because once you open them, the day will officially begin and there is no undoing that threshold. You feel the cool air on your face more distinctly now, and the tip of your nose is definitely cold. Your stomach is empty, but not in the way that demands food yet. Just a hollow awareness that you will eat bread and cheese after the birds have fed. Your mouth is slightly dry from the night, and you move your tongue across your teeth in a slow, absent gesture. These small physical sensations are the language of your body waking up, and you listen to them without judgment. You are not tired anymore. The heaviness of sleep has drained away completely, leaving behind a clear, calm alertness that is ready for whatever comes next. The distance between this readiness and the first movement of your hand is now very small, a gap that could be crossed at any moment, and you hover on the edge of it with a quiet patience that is entirely natural. The songbirds have found their full voices now, and a small chorus of them is calling back and forth in the garden below the window, their notes bright and liquid in the cold air. They are joined by the cooing of a dove from the Dovercote near the gatehouse, a soft repetitive sound that carries the same calm energy as your own breathing. The world outside is coming alive in its slow, predictable way, and you feel yourself being drawn gently toward it, like a boat tugged by a mild current. The blanket is still warm, but the warmth is no longer enough to keep you entirely still, and you feel a tiny stirring of intention in your right hand, a vague impulse that has not yet become a command. You let it rest there, a seed of motion that will sprout when it is ready, and you continue to watch the grey light through your closed eyelids as it slowly brightens. You become aware of your own heartbeat, a faint steady pulse that you can feel in your chest and in the tips of your fingers where they rest against the pillow. It beats at a walking pace, unhurried and strong, and you count a few of its beats without meaning to, then let the count go. You are completely at peace. The castle is still quiet, the rooster is silent now. The birds in the garden have paused their singing for a breath, and in that interval of silence you feel the full weight of the calm that surrounds you. Nothing is wrong anywhere. No one is calling for you, no emergency is unfolding, no decision needs to be made. You are simply a falconer in a small stone room, and the morning is arriving exactly as it always does. Your right hand makes the decision before you do. You feel it move under the blanket, a slow uncurling of the fingers and a slight rotation of the wrist, and then it slides across your chest toward the edge of the blanket. The motion is so gradual that it barely disturbs the fabric, and the cool air that sneaks in through the gap is a gentle shock against your warm skin. Your hand finds the rough edge of the wool and pauses there, holding the boundary between the warm world inside and the cool world outside. You open your eyes at last, and the room swims into view, grey and dim and exactly as you knew it would be. The window shutters are pale rectangles. The table is a solid shape. The pitcher and basin are waiting, and your tunic hangs like a patient ghost on its peg. You look at all of this without moving your head, your gaze traveling slowly from one familiar object to the next, and then your hand tightens on the edge of the blanket and you begin, with infinite slowness, to push it back. Your hand tightens on the edge of the wool blanket and you draw it down with a motion so gradual that the air enters in a slow, cool wave rather than a sudden rush. The blanket folds back over itself, and the coolness settles against your chest and arms, raising the fine hairs on your skin and sending a mild, pleasant shiver across your shoulders. You sit up on the mattress, not quickly, but in a sequence of small adjustments, first propping yourself on one elbow, then swinging your legs sideways so that your feet come to rest on the scattered rushes that cover the stone floor. The rushes prickle against the soles of your feet, a sensation that is dry and faintly scratchy, familiar from every morning of your life in this castle. You sit on the edge of the bed with your hands resting loosely on your thighs, and you look at the room through eyes that have now fully opened to the grey half-light. The chamber is still dim, the only source of illumination, the thin pale lines around the edges of the shutters where the dawn has grown stronger, but you can see the shape of everything clearly enough to move without hesitation. The air outside the blanket is cold, but not bitterly so, just the natural chill of a stone room before the sun has climbed above the walls. You feel it against your face and neck and the skin of your forearms, and you accept it without haste. On the small wooden table across the room, the clay pitcher and basin wait exactly where they always do, their surfaces touched by the faintest gleam of the grey light. You rise from the bed and cross the short distance to the table, your bare feet making soft sounds on the rushes, and then a quiet padding on the bare stone beyond them. The stones are smooth and cool underfoot, polished by generations of feet that have walked this same small path, and you notice the slight difference in temperature between the areas with rushes and those without. You stop before the table and look down at the pitcher, a simple vessel of red-brown clay with a pinched lip and a handle shaped by the potter's thumb, and you lift it with both hands. The clay is cool and slightly rough against your palms, and the water inside makes a low sloshing sound as you tilt the pitcher over the basin. You pour carefully, a thin, clear stream that catches the grey light and splashes softly into the earthenware bowl, and you watch the water pool and settle until the basin is half full. You set the pitcher back in its place and dip both hands into the water. The coolness wraps around your fingers and knuckles and the tender skin between them, and you bring a double handful up to your face with a quick, practiced motion. The water shocks your cheeks and forehead and the bridge of your nose, not unpleasantly, but with a clean, clarifying cold that chases away the last clinging threads of drowsiness. You splash your face a second time and a third, each splash deliberate and unhurried, and you feel the water trickle down your neck and dampen the collar of your undertunic. When you are satisfied, you reach for the linen cloth that lies folded beside the basin, a square of plain undyed fabric that is rough from many washings and many dryings in the sun on the herb garden wall. You press it to your face and pat the skin dry with small gentle dabs, not rubbing but blotting, and the cloth absorbs the water and leaves behind a faint scent of lye soap and summer hay. You pat your neck and the backs of your hands as well, and then you fold the cloth and set it aside. The room is a little brighter now, or perhaps your eyes have simply adjusted further, and you turn your attention to the wooden peg on the wall beside the door where your clothes hang waiting. Your linen undertunic, is a long, shapeless garment of undyed fabric that falls below your knees, and you have been wearing it through the night as you always do, so it needs no changing. It is slightly rumpled from sleep, the sleeves twisted and the neckline pulled askew, and you straighten it with a few calm tugs at the hem and a smoothing of the fabric across your chest. The linen is soft against your skin, worn thin in places from years of use, and it holds a trace of your own warmth even now. The overtunic comes next, a garment of dark green wool that hangs on the peg with its sleeves drooping gently like the folded wings of a resting bird. You lift it down and the wool is cool and substantial in your hands, smelling faintly of lanolin and the dry, clean dust of the Mews. You gather the fabric in both hands and pull it over your head, and the tunic settles around your shoulders and falls to your knees with a soft, heavy sway. You work your arms through the sleeves and adjust the fit at the neck and the belt line, smoothing the wool down over your hips until it hangs straight. The leather belt is next, a long strip of dark brown cowhide with a simple iron buckle that has been polished by the friction of daily fastening. You thread it through the loops sewn into the tunic at the waist and pull it snug but not tight, securing the tongue into the familiar hole that has been stretched over time to fit you exactly. The weight of the belt settles against your lower back, and the tunic feels anchored now, a contained and orderly garment rather than a loose sack. You reach for your hose, thick woolen leg coverings of a lighter brown, and you sit down on the stool to pull them on. Each leg slides into its hose with a slow, careful motion, the fabric stretching slightly over your calves and knees, and you tie the laces at the top to the drawstring of your brace with a series of simple automatic knots. The hose are warm and snug, and you flex your toes inside them to test the fit before turning to your boots. The boots are of soft, undyed leather that has molded over months to the exact shape of your feet, the heels slightly worn on the outer edge from your particular gait. You slip your feet into them one at a time and work your heels down with a gentle push, then lace them loosely around your ankles. The leather is cool at first but warms quickly, and the boots feel like an extension of your own body. The final garment is your hood, a deep cowl of dark brown wool that hangs from its own peg. You take it down and run your fingers along the hem where the stitching has been repaired with a slightly different shade of thread, a tiny variation that only you would ever notice. You pull the hood over your head and settle the fabric around your neck and shoulders, arranging the folds so that they drape evenly on both sides. The hood frames your face and blocks the cool air from your ears and the back of your neck, and the wool is soft against your skin. You stand for a moment in the middle of the room, fully dressed now, feeling the combined weight of the clothes and the way they move with you as you shift your weight from one foot to the other. The sensation is one of being properly prepared, enclosed in a familiar shell of fabric and leather that is suited to the cool air of the corridor and the Mews beyond. The light at the shutters has continued its patient advance, and the room is no longer grey, but a pale, muted cream that reveals the colours of the objects around you. The picture is red-brown, the basin the darker brown, the wood of the table and stool a warm honeyed hue, and the rushes on the floor are a mix of tan and pale gold. You look toward the small brazier in the corner, a squat iron basket on short legs, and you see that the embers from last night are still faintly glowing beneath a cap of fine grey ash. You will not tend them now because the Mews has its own brazier, and you will spend the morning there, so you leave the fire to its slow slumber and turn instead to the candle. A small tallow candle in a plain iron holder sits on the table beside the basin, a stub of pale wax with a charred wick that is curled and black. Beside it lies a covered clay pot that holds a bed of embers from the kitchen fire, refreshed each evening by the kitchen boy as part of his final duties. You remove the lid from the pot, and a faint wisp of warm air rises, carrying the scent of old wood smoke and ash. You take a thin splint of pine wood from the bundle on the table and touch its tip to the embers, holding it steady until a tiny flame appears, a yellow tongue that quivers and then strengthens as it catches the dry wood. You lift the splint to the candle wick, and the flame transfers with a small hiss, and the wick begins to burn with a steady, upright flame that pushes back the remaining shadows. The candle light is warm and golden, a living presence in the room, and it makes the walls seem to lean in a little more closely, as if the chamber itself is drawing comfort from the small fire. You lift the candle holder carefully, and the flame wavers for a moment before settling. The wax is soft and warm under the heat of the flame, releasing a faint animal scent that mixes with the clean smell of the wool and the lingering freshness of the water. You cross to the door, a heavy oak panel set into the stone with iron strap hinges that are dark with age. The latch has a simple iron hook that lifts with a push of your thumb, and it makes a quiet click that is loud in the stillness of the room. You pull the door inward, and the corridor beyond opens up before you, a narrow stone passage that stretches away into deeper darkness. The air in the corridor is cooler than the air in the chamber, and it moves gently against your face, carrying a faint draught that smells of old stone, distant wood smoke, and the general quiet stillness of the castle at this hour. You step through the doorway and pull the door closed behind you without latching it, leaving it just barely ajar so that you can return without effort. The corridor is long and straight, its walls made of the same grey stone as your chamber, irregular blocks fitted together with mortar that has crumbled slightly in places over the centuries. The floor is stone as well, worn smooth in the center where countless feet have walked over the years, creating a shallow polished groove that catches the candlelight and reflects it as a dim, wavering stripe. You hold the candle before you at chest height and begin to walk, your steps slow and measured, the soft leather of your boots making only a gentle scuffing sound against the stone. The flame burns steadily, protected from draughts by the still air of the interior corridor, and it casts a small pool of golden light that moves with you, illuminating the walls to either side and the low ceiling overhead. Beyond the reach of the candle, the corridor fades into complete blackness, but you do not need to see far because you know every step of this path intimately. You have walked it in darkness and in half-light, in summer and winter, and your feet remember the slight unevenness of the stones and the exact distance between the doorways. The first doorway you pass on your left is the entrance to the storeroom where sacks of grain and dried beans are kept, a heavy timber door with no windows and a thick iron lock that glints dully as the candlelight passes over it. The door is closed and silent, and you do not pause. A few steps farther on the right, the wall opens into a shallow alcove that holds nothing but a wooden bench, a place where guards once sat in older times when the castle kept a night watch along the inner corridors. The bench is empty now, its surface worn to a smooth polish, and a single cobweb stretches from the armrest to the wall, barely visible in the dim light. You continue past it without slowing. The corridor makes a gentle turn, not a sharp angle, but a slow curve that follows the inner wall of the keep, and as you round the curve you encounter a subtle change in the air, a slight warmth that emanates from a large closed door on your right. This is the entrance to the main kitchens, a set of double doors made of thick oak planks bound with iron, and even now, at this early hour, you can hear faint sounds from beyond them, the muffled clank of a pot being moved, the distant murmur of voices, the low roar of the great hearth that has been burning all night. A thin line of yellow light glows beneath the doors, and the smell of fresh wood smoke and rising bread dough seeps through the cracks. You pass this door without stopping as well, though you note the warmth against your side as you walk by, a brief pocket of comfort in the cool corridor. Beyond the kitchen, the corridor straightens again and begins a very slight downward slope, a gentle descent that leads toward the outer wall and the mews. The walls here are rougher, the stones less carefully fitted, and in places you see the glint of moisture that has seeped through from the earth outside, staining the grey stone with patches of darker damp. The air is cooler again, and it smells differently now, more of earth and stone and less of human habitation. The candle flame flickers once as you pass through a spot where a draught finds its way through a narrow ventilation slit high overhead, a thin slot in the stone that admits a thread of outside air. The flame bends sideways and then straightens again, and you cup your hand around it instinctively until the draught is past. The slit shows a sliver of pale sky, now the color of dove grey, and you know that the sun is climbing behind the clouds or the hills, still hidden, but working its slow way upward. You pass the stone steps that spiral upward to the great hall, a wide staircase that twists out of sight into darkness. You glance toward it as you pass, and your candlelight catches the lower steps and the worn iron handrail, but you do not ascend because the Mews lies ahead, not above. A draught moves down the stairwell, cooler and slightly damper, carrying the faint metallic scent of the old armor that hangs in the hall above, and then you are past it and the air settles again. The corridor narrows slightly, and the ceiling becomes lower, the beams here rough-hewn and black with age. You know that you are approaching the outer wall, the thickest part of the castle's defences, and the Mews is built against its inner face, sharing its strength and its quiet. Your pace does not quicken because there is no need for speed. You walk with the same measured, unhurried rhythm that you have maintained since you rose from the bed. As you approach the far end of the corridor, the darkness ahead begins to soften. The Mews has its own door, and that door is not perfectly sealed. A faint grey light seeps around its edges, the first natural light you have encountered since leaving your chamber. You slow your steps even further, allowing the transition from candlelight to dawnlight to happen gradually. The Mews door is a low, wide portal of old timber, the wood darkened by time and scored with shallow scratches where generations of birds have rested briefly on the lintel, or the falconers have leaned tools against the jamb. The iron latch is a simple hook, identical to the one on your chamber door, and it is cold to the touch as you reach for it. You pause before lifting the latch, standing just outside the door with your candle still burning, and you listen. From within comes a soft, almost imperceptible sound, the rustle of feathers being preened in the darkness, the faint creak of a wooden perch adjusting under a bird's weight, a low, gentle cooing sound from the merlin. The sounds are quiet and calm, and they confirm that all is well within. You place your free hand on the rough wood of the door and feel the cool grain under your palm, and you take one last breath of the corridor's still air before lifting the latch and pushing the door open into the dim, quiet space of the Mews. The door swings inward on its iron hinges with a low, quiet sound that is more a vibration in the wood than a noise, and you step across the threshold into the Mews. The candle in your hand is still burning, its small flame steady now that you're out of the corridor draught, and it throws a warm golden circle that barely reaches the nearest perch before softening into shadow. You pause just inside the doorway to let the space welcome you and to let your senses adjust, because the Mews is a world unto itself, a long, low room built against the inner face of the curtain wall, and it has its own air, its own smells, its own particular stillness. The first thing you notice is the warmth, a subtle but distinct difference from the corridor, a gentle animal warmth generated by the bodies of 3 sleeping raptors and the thick straw underfoot. The second thing you notice is the smell, a layered combination of dry straw, clean feathers, the faint tang of well-oiled leather, the dusty sweet scent of dried chamomile and rue scattered among the floor rushes, and beneath it all the honest earthy presence of the birds themselves. The smell is not strong or unpleasant, but it is unmistakably the smell of the Mews, and it settles around you like a familiar garment. You close the door behind you with a soft push, and the latch clicks into place with a tiny metallic sound that one of the birds acknowledges by shifting on its perch. You hear the whisper of talons adjusting on padded wood, and the faint rustle of feathers being resettled, and then silence returns. The Mews is a place of quiet, and you are careful to preserve that quiet as you begin to move. You lift the candle a little higher and look down the length of the room, your gaze travelling slowly over the row of perches that stand against the left-hand wall. Each perch is a sturdy wooden block set on a short post, the top padded with a layer of felted wool and covered with a piece of soft doe leather that has been darkened by years of contact with talons. On the first perch sits the goshawk, a large, powerful silhouette that is completely still. On the second perch, a few feet farther down, the peregrine waits, slightly smaller and more slender in shape. On the third perch, near the far end where the ventilation slits pierce the wall, the merlin rests, a tiny compact form that seems almost like a carving. All 3 birds are hooded, their heads covered by soft leather helmets that block the lights and keep them calm, and their stillness is the stillness of creatures at complete rest. You walk toward the first perch, the one nearest the door, where the goshawk waits. Your footsteps are quiet on the straw that covers the stone floor, a thick layer of golden stalks that crackles softly under your boots. As you approach, you slow your pace even further, because you know that the goshawk can sense your presence through the hood, can feel the vibration of your footsteps, and hear the subtle changes in the air. You stop a respectful distance away, about an arm's length, and you let the candlelight fall gently on her. She is a magnificent bird, a female goshawk of at least 5 seasons, her plumage a subtle pattern of grey and white barring on the breast, and darker slate across the back. Even hooded, even completely still, she has a presence that fills the space around her, a calm, coiled potential that you have learned to read over the many months you have kept her. Her talons are wrapped loosely around the padded perch, the black curves shining faintly in the candlelight, and her breast feathers are full and smooth, a sign of good health and proper feeding. You speak to her now, not in words, but in a low, formless murmur, a sound that has no meaning other than the tone of calm recognition. The murmur rises from your throat softly, a gentle hum that tells the bird you are here and that all is well. You do not reach for her yet. Instead, you stand quietly and let her become accustomed to your nearness, even through the darkness of the hood. After a moment, you see her talons flex once, a slow gripping and releasing of the perch, and you know that she is aware of you and ready for contact. You step closer and raise your free hand toward her chest, not to touch her, but to allow her to feel the warmth of your skin near her feathers. She does not flinch or ruffle. She simply remains as she is, a statue of patience. You set the candle holder down on a small wooden shelf that protrudes from the wall near the perch, a shelf you built for this exact purpose, and now both your hands are free. You reach for the jesses first, the thin strips of soft leather that hang from the goshawk's legs, each one about 6 inches long and punched with a small hole at the end. You take one jess between your thumb and forefinger and run your fingers slowly along its entire length, from the anklet at the bird's leg down to the tip where the hole is. The leather is supple and sound, with no cracks or fraying, and it flexes easily under your touch. You check the stitching on the anklet itself, the tiny tight stitches that hold the leather around the bird's leg just snug enough to stay in place without binding, and you find them all intact. You repeat this with the other jess, your movements slow and deliberate, and the goshawk remains perfectly still, accepting your touch as a matter of course. The swivel is next, a small brass mechanism that connects the two jesses to the single leash, its purpose to prevent the leash from tangling when the bird moves. You lift it gently and turn it in the candlelight, watching the two rings spin independently of each other, with a faint, smooth movement. The brass is warm from the bird's body heat, and it gleams dully where your fingers have polished it over time. You check that the rings are not bent or cracked, and that the central rivet holds them together securely, and then you set it down again with care. The leash itself is a longer strip of leather, perhaps 3 feet in length, that is attached to the swivel and then looped around a staple driven into the wall near the perch. You run your hand along the leash, feeling the cool, oiled surface, and you confirm that it is free of wear and that the knot at the staple is tight. All of this equipment is simple, almost primitive, but it is made well and maintained carefully, and it serves its purpose without fail. With the equipment checked, you turn your attention to the hood. The goshawk's hood is a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, made of soft calf leather and shaped to fit her head exactly, with a small plume of feathers on top that are more for the falconer's eye than the bird's comfort. The braces, 2 thin strips of leather that run down the back of the hood and are used to open it, lie flat and smooth against the bird's neck. You touch the braces lightly, just to confirm that they are not tangled, and then you run your fingertip around the edge of the hood where it meets the bird's feathers, checking that it is not too tight and that no feather is caught underneath. The goshawk turns her head a fraction of an inch at this touch, a tiny movement that you feel rather than see, and then she settles again. The hood is in perfect condition, and the bird is comfortable. You step back from the goshawk and pick up the candle again. You stand for a moment, looking at her with a quiet satisfaction that has nothing to do with pride, and then you turn and move toward the second perch where the peregrine waits. The peregrine is a younger bird, a male of perhaps 2 seasons, and he is smaller and more slender than the goshawk, with plumage that leans toward a cool blue-gray on the back and a creamy white chest marked with fine dark barring. He sits lower on his perch, his body more horizontal, and his hooded head is tucked slightly into his shoulders in a posture that suggests deep sleep. You slow your steps as you approach him, because the peregrine is a more sensitive bird than the goshawk, quicker to startle and longer to calm, and you want to give him time to register your presence. You stop a little farther away than you did with the goshawk and begin the same low murmur, the formless, calming sound that bridges the gap between your two species. The peregrine's talons tighten on the perch immediately, a small reflexive response, and then they loosen again as your voice reaches him. You wait a few extra moments before stepping closer, and when you do, you move with even greater slowness, your hand rising toward him at a pace that is almost imperceptible. You touch his jesses, as you did with the goshawk, running your fingers along the thin leather, and you feel a slight difference in the texture because these jesses are newer, cut from a different hide that has a slightly finer grain. They are in excellent condition, still supple and clean, and the anklets fit him well. The swivel on the peregrine is a little smaller than the goshawk's, made of the same brass but sized to his lighter weight, and it spins freely and easily in your hand. When you touch the peregrine's hood, he gives a soft chirrup, a small sound that is not quite a complaint and not quite a greeting, just a little vocal note that escapes him before he can stop it. You pause your hand and let him settle again, and then you continue your inspection. The hood fits him perfectly, the braces lying flat, the eye openings positioned just so over his covered eyes. You note that the leather around the edges is slightly paler than the rest, a sign that this hood was made more recently, and you file that observation away for no particular reason other than the fact that you notice things. With the peregrine checked, you step back and let him return to his stillness. The third perch holds the merlin, and as you approach her, the candlelight reveals her tiny form in all its delicate detail. The merlin is a small falcon, not much larger than a blackbird, and she is the oldest bird in the Mews, a female of at least 7 seasons who was captured from the wild as a young adult and has since become completely accustomed to human company. She is used by the lady of the castle for hunting small birds in the fields, a gentle sport that requires little more than a quick dash and a sharp turn, and she is a favorite of everyone who sees her. Her plumage is a soft brown on the back and a pale buff on the chest, with dark streaks that are finer and more delicate than those of the larger birds. She is fluffed up against the night chill, her feathers puffed out so that she looks almost round, and the hood on her head is tiny, a miniature version of the larger hoods, complete with a miniature plume. You do not need to be as cautious with the merlin as with the peregrine, because she is an old, calm bird who has seen everything before, but you still move slowly out of habit and respect. You murmur your low greeting, and she responds with a tiny shake of her head, a movement that makes the little plume on her hood bob back and forth. You smile, a small private smile that no one sees, and then you reach for her jesses. The merlin's equipment is scaled down in every way, the jesses narrow and thin, the swivel barely larger than a pea, the leash a slender cord of braided leather. You check each piece with the same thoroughness you gave to the larger birds, and you find everything in order. The merlin's hood is slightly older than the peregrine's, the leather softened and darkened by years of handling, but it is still sound and it still fits her perfectly. You touch the braces and she makes no response, completely at ease under your familiar hands. With all 3 birds greeted and all equipment examined, you return to the center of the Mews and stand still for a moment, the candle in your hand burning steadily. The silence of the room has not been disturbed by your presence. If anything, it has deepened, as if the birds and you together have created a pocket of quiet that the rest of the world cannot enter. You look toward the high ventilation slits that pierce the outer wall, narrow openings that let in air and a muted version of the sounds from outside, and you see that the grey light of dawn has grown noticeably stronger even in the short time you have been here. The slits are now pale rectangles of cool, colourless luminescence that cut through the darkness of the mews and fall in soft diagonal shafts onto the straw floor. The candle's golden glow is beginning to be diluted by this natural light, the two sources blending into a gentle, ambiguous illumination that makes the whole room seem to float somewhere between night and day. You take a slow, deep breath of the Mews air, letting it fill your lungs completely, and you feel the calm of the space settle into your own body. Your heart beats at a walking pace, your shoulders are relaxed, and your mind is quiet. The first greetings of the morning are complete, and everything is as it should be. You lift the candle and begin to walk toward the preparation table at the far end of the room, where the morning's food waits under a covered clay dish, and as you move, you feel the gaze of the birds behind you, even through their hoods, a calm and patient awareness that follows you across the room. The day has begun, but there is still no hurry, no urgency, only the slow and steady unfolding of the familiar. You leave the central aisle of the Mews and cross to the far end, where the small preparation area occupies the space between the last perch and the outer wall. Here the light from the high ventilation slits falls more directly, and even this early in the morning you can see clearly without the candle, so you lift the little iron holder and blow out the flame with a soft, steady breath. A thin ribbon of white smoke curls upward, and the smell of warm tallow drifts past your face before fading into the larger scent of the Mews. You set the candle on its shelf and turn your full attention to the sturdy wooden table that stands against the wall, a simple piece of furniture built from oak planks that have been scrubbed clean so many times the grain has risen into soft ridges. Beside the table, against the cold stone, rests a shallow stone basin with a wooden plug in its drain hole, and above the table a single shelf holds the tools of this part of your work, a bone-handled knife, a whetstone in a leather pouch, a small wooden mallet, and a stack of clean linen scraps. On the table itself sits a covered clay dish, a wide, shallow bowl with a fitted lid that keeps the contents cool and protected through the night. The dish is of red-brown clay, unglazed except for a thin, clear coating on the inside that makes it easy to clean, and it is heavy enough that you use both hands when you move it. You reach for the lid and lift it away with a careful, even motion, and the scent of the meat rises to meet you in a sudden, honest wave. It is the smell of fresh, raw flesh, beef heart and young poultry, not yet spoiled by any warmth, just the clean, metallic, slightly sweet odor of muscle and tissue that has been kept in the cool dark of the thick stone walls. This smell is not unpleasant to you. Not after so many years. It is simply the smell of sustenance, of the food chain that links the fields to the falcons, and you breathe it in, as a baker breathes in the scent of yeast and flour. Inside the dish, the meat is arranged in tidy portions, just as you left it the evening before. There are long strips of lean beef heart, deep red and dense, cut from a larger piece that the kitchen supplied after the main meal. The strips are about the length of your palm and the thickness of your smallest finger, and they glisten slightly with the natural moisture of the meat. Beside them, resting on a separate piece of clean linen to prevent them from sticking to the clay, are a few day-old chicks from the Dover cote, their skin pale and their bodies soft and pliable. These chicks are a special treat for the birds, a supplement to the regular diet that provides the delicate bones and organs that keep a raptor healthy, and you are careful to portion them out sparingly. The meat is cool to the touch, having absorbed the chill of the stone table through the clay, and you know it has remained fresh and wholesome through the night. You reach up to the shelf and take down the knife, the one with the bone handle that you have used for this purpose since you first became a falconer. The handle is made from the leg bone of a deer, smoothed by years of handling until it shines with a dull, waxy polish that fits the curves of your palm exactly. The blade is a simple wedge of iron, not fancy but sharp, and you test its edge by running the flat of your thumb lightly across it before you begin. Satisfied, you also retrieve a small wooden board that leans against the wall, a board of beech wood that serves as your cutting surface, and you lay it flat on the table next to the clay dish. You begin with the beef heart strips. You lift one strip from the dish and lay it across the board, then position the knife at its midpoint. The blade sinks through the meat with a smooth, clean motion, parting the fibers with a faint, wet sound that is barely audible. You cut the strip into pieces that are appropriate for the goshawk, pieces about the size of the last joint of your thumb, large enough to give her a satisfying mouthful, but not so large that she would struggle to swallow. Each cut is a single deliberate stroke, the knife moving down and forward and then lifting again, and the pieces accumulate on the board in a small orderly pile. The meat is cool and firm under your fingers, and the knife leaves a thin film of moisture on the cutting board that catches the grey light. When you have cut enough for the goshawk, you turn your attention to the peregrine's portion and adjust the size of the pieces downward, making them slightly smaller, more slender, each one about the width of a quill and half as long. You work with the same steady rhythm, the knife tapping softly against the board as you finish each cut, a gentle, percussive sound that repeats over and over like a slow heartbeat. The pile of smaller pieces grows next to the first, and you keep them separate with a simple sweep of your finger. For the merlin, you must cut the pieces even smaller, tiny morsels that are barely more than a beakful, and this requires a different grip on the knife, a more delicate pressure, and a slower pace. You hold the meat steady with the tips of your fingers and slice it crosswise into thin rounds, then halve those rounds into minuscule portions that the little falcon can swallow in a single quick motion. The chicks are next, and you handle them with the same calm, practical touch. You take one of the day-old chicks and lay it on the board, and with the knife you divide it into several small pieces, cutting through the soft bones and the tender, underdeveloped feathers. The sound is a little different, a slight crunch that speaks of calcium and cartilage, and the scent that rises is a little milder, more neutral. You portion the chick pieces among the 3 piles, adding a bit of variety to each bird's meal, and then you set the knife aside and wipe your hands on one of the linen scraps from the shelf. The small wooden bowls wait on a lower shelf beneath the table, 3 of them, each one carved from a single block of beech wood during the long winter evenings when the castle was quiet and you had time for such slow, meditative work. The bowls are slightly different from one another because you carved them freehand without templates, and each one bears the faint marks of your knife on its outer surface. The largest bowl is for the goshawk, a shallow dish with a wide rim that fits comfortably in your palm. The middle bowl is for the peregrine, slightly deeper with a narrower base. The smallest bowl, barely larger than a walnut shell, is for the merlin. You set the bowls in a row on the table and transfer the meat into them, using your fingers as a gentle scoop, arranging the pieces so that they are easy to pick up one at a time during the feeding. Before you approach the birds, you turn to the stone basin and unplug the drain hole. Then pour a small amount of fresh water from a bucket into the basin to wash your hands. The water is cool and clean, and you rub your fingers together to remove any traces of meat and tallow. Then dry them on a fresh linen cloth. From a hook on the wall near the first perch, you take down your thick leather glove, the one with the reinforced cuff that is shaped to your hand and marked with the tiny puncture holes of 100 feeding sessions. You slide your left hand into the glove, working your fingers into the stalls and pulling the cuff snug around your wrist, and the leather is cool and smooth against your skin, smelling faintly of neat's foot oil and the dust of the Mews. You pick up the goshawk's bowl in your ungloved right hand and cross to her perch with the same slow, measured steps you always use. The goshawk is still hooded, still motionless except for the gentle rise and fall of her breast as she breathes, and you stop a short distance away and make a soft clicking sound with your tongue against the roof of your mouth. This sound is a signal, a small promise that food is coming, and you have used it since the bird first came into your care. The goshawk's head tilts slightly at the sound, a tiny movement that shows she is heard and understood. You set the bowl on the wooden shelf near the perch and then reach for the hood with both hands, your gloved left hand steadying the bird and your right hand working the braces. The braces are two thin strips of leather that run from the back of the hood down the bird's neck, and you pinch them gently between your thumb and forefinger and draw them apart. The hood loosens, the leather relaxing around the bird's head, and you lift it away with a slow, careful motion that allows her to transition from darkness to light gradually. The goshawk blinks, her large orange eyes taking in the dim Mews with an expression that is calm and unstartled, and she turns her head once to the left and once to the right, orienting herself. The pupils of her eyes contract as they adjust, and then she looks directly at you, a steady, level gaze that contains no fear and no aggression, only the quiet recognition of a creature that knows its keeper. You offer your gloved fist, holding it just in front of the perch at the level of her legs, and the goshawk steps onto it without hesitation. Her grip is firm and strong, her talons wrapping around the padded leather with a practiced precision, and you feel her weight settle onto your arm, a solid, reassuring heaviness that you have come to know as well as the weight of your own hand. You bring your fist up to chest level and turn slightly so that the light from the ventilation slit falls across her, and you look at her for a moment, checking the clarity of her eyes, the smoothness of her feathers, the evenness of her breathing. Everything is as it should be. You take the first piece of meat from the bowl with your right hand and hold it near her beak, a strip of beef heart that is still cool from the clay dish. The goshawk looks at the meat, then at you, and then she leans forward and takes it from your fingers with a delicate, almost gentle motion that belies the power of her hooked beak. She tilts her head back and swallows, a small jerking motion of her throat that sends the piece of meat down in a single smooth movement, and then she looks at you again, waiting. You hold the next piece and she takes it the same way, and the next, each offering separated by a pause of several seconds. During the pauses, you watch her face and her throat, looking for any sign of discomfort or difficulty, but there is none. She swallows easily, and her crop, the small pouch at the base of her neck where the food first collects, is soft and unstrained. You continue feeding her until the bowl is empty, the last few pieces including the soft morsels of chick that she takes with the same calm appetite, and when she is finished, she ruffles her feathers once, a full-body shake that starts at her head and travels down to her tail, and then she settles again on your fist. You hold her for a moment longer, letting her rest in the quiet after her meal, and then you reach for the hood. You slide it over her head with the same gentle care, easing it into place and tightening the braces just enough to hold it secure without pressure, and the goshawk accepts it without protest. You step back to the perch and lower your fist, and she steps off with the same precision with which she stepped on, her talons finding the padded wood and gripping it securely. You return her leash to its staple and then pick up the empty bowl. The peregrine is next. You set the empty bowl aside and pick up the middle-sized bowl, the one with the slightly deeper well, and you approach the second perch. The peregrine is waiting, still hooded, but you notice a subtle tension in his posture that was not there when you first greeted him, a slight lifting of the shoulders and a tightening of the talons that tells you he is aware of the food and is eager for it. You make the clicking sound, and he responds immediately with a soft, high-pitched chirp, a sound that is more a whistle than a call, and you smile again, that small, private smile. You remove his hood with the same slow pull of the braces, and his dark eyes are already wide and alert, the pupils dilating and contracting as he takes in the Mews. He blinks rapidly, 3 or 4 times in quick succession, and then his gaze fixes on the bowl in your hand. You offer your gloved fist, and the peregrine steps onto it with a quick, light movement, his weight barely half that of the goshawk, and his talons are sharper and more needle-like through the leather. You feel the difference immediately, the way he balances more delicately, the way his wings twitch slightly as he settles, and you adjust your arm to give him a steady platform. You take the first piece of meat, a slender strip cut to his size, and you hold it toward him. He takes it with a swift, neat motion, his beak snipping the meat from your fingers as cleanly as a pair of scissors, and he swallows with a smaller, quicker jerk of his head. You feed him piece by piece, the same slow rhythm, the same long pauses, and you watch him with the same quiet attention. His appetite is strong, and his crop is flat and ready, and he shows no sign of the nervousness that sometimes affects young birds during feeding. When the bowl is empty, he shifts his weight on your fist and preens a single feather on his breast, a quick, tidy motion of his beak, and then he looks up at you as if to ask if there is more. There is no more, and you rehood him with the same gentleness, his body relaxing as the familiar darkness returns, and you return him to his perch. The merlin's turn comes last. You take the smallest bowl, the tiny one that fits in the palm of your hand like an acorn, and you walk to the far end of the Mews, where the little falcon sits fluffed and patient on her perch. She is so small that even hooded she seems alert, her head cocked slightly, as if she is listening to every sound you make. You make the clicking noise, and she gives a soft, trilling chirp in return, a delicate sound that is like water over small stones. You remove her hood, and her bright black eyes blink up at you, the expression in them curious and calm, and her tiny beak opens and closes once in a silent, anticipatory motion. You offer your gloved fist, and she hops onto it with a lightness that is almost weightless, her feet gripping the leather with a pressure so gentle you barely feel it. You feed her the tiny morsels, each one a piece of meat the size of a pea, and she takes them from your fingers with a speed and precision that is astonishing in such a small creature. There is no hesitation, no pause to examine the food. She simply takes it and swallows in one rapid motion, her head bobbing once, and then she is ready for the next piece. You offer the pieces one at a time with the same slow spacing you used for the other birds, because even a small falcon needs to eat at a measured pace, and she waits patiently between each offering, her bright eyes watching your hand. The feeding of the merlin is always a quiet delight. The smallness of the bird and the quickness of her movements are contrast to the larger birds, and you find yourself smiling again, this time not privately, but openly, though no one is there to see. When the merlin's bowl is empty, she does a tiny shake of her whole body, a miniature version of the goshawk's ruffle, and then she reaches down and preens one of her talons with a quick, businesslike nibble. You rehood her, the tiny hood fitting over her head like a perfect cap, and she settles immediately into stillness. You return her to her perch and step back, your gloved hand now empty, and your right hand holding 3 small wooden bowls that are clean and dry. You return to the preparation table and set the bowls down in their usual place on the lower shelf. You take off the leather glove and hang it back on its hook, and then you wash your hands once more in the stone basin, scrubbing them thoroughly with a scrap of linen and a small lump of lye soap that sits in the dish beside the bucket. The water is cool, and it rinses away the last traces of the morning's work, and you dry your hands and stand for a moment in the quiet mews, looking at the 3 still, hooded birds on their perches. They are fed, they are comfortable, and the room is peaceful. The grey light from the ventilation slits has continued its slow brightening, and you know that the next tasks are waiting, but you do not hurry toward them. You simply stand and breathe, the calm of the feeding settling around you like a soft, invisible cloak. With the feeding complete and the birds settle back into their hooded stillness, you turn your attention to the state of the mews itself. The room is quiet now, quieter even than before, as if the birds have entered a deeper calm after their meal, and the grey light from the ventilation slits has continued its slow, patient brightening until it casts a cool, even illumination across the entire space. You can see clearly now, without any candle, the corners of the mews revealing themselves in soft shades of brown and grey, and you notice the small accumulations of a night's occupancy, the scattered straw, the tiny down feathers, the pale splashes of mutes on the stone floor beneath each perch. This is not mess in any unpleasant sense, only the natural evidence of living creatures resting through the dark hours, and attending to it is not a chore, but a continuation of the sane, quiet care you have already given. You walk to the corner near the door where a broad wicker basket sits, a sturdy container woven from withy branches that were harvested in the spring and dried in the sun on the bailey wall. The basket is large enough to hold a day's sweepings and light enough to carry with one hand, and it has 2 rope handles that have been worn smooth by years of use. Beside the basket leans a hand broom made of birch twigs bound together with a strip of rawhide, the twigs splayed at the ends from countless sweeping motions. You pick up the broom first, feeling the rough texture of the bark against your palm and the slight springiness of the bound twigs, and then you lift the basket by its handles and carry both to the far end of the mews where the merlin's perch stands against the wall. You begin your sweeping at the farthest corner, the place where the outer wall meets the side wall, a junction of cold stone that gathers a surprising amount of dust and stray feathers. You bend slightly from the waist and draw the broom toward you in a slow, steady stroke, the birch twigs combing through the straw and pulling the loose debris into a small pile. The sound the broom makes is a soft, whispering shush that repeats with each stroke, a gentle, rhythmic noise that is one of the oldest sounds of human caretaking. You work your way along the base of the outer wall, moving from the corner toward the merlin's perch, and as you go you gather the scattered straw into a loose windrow, a long, low ridge of golden stalks mixed with a few tiny down feathers that catch the light and drift upward when the broom passes near them. The down feathers float for a moment on the still air and then settle again, and you sweep them into the pile with the next stroke. Under the merlin's perch you pause and use a different motion, a careful short scrape that dislodges the bits of dried mute without disturbing the bird above. The merlin is hooded and still, and she pays no attention to the broom moving beneath her, though you see one of her talons flex once and then relax. You sweep the debris into a neat pile and then set the broom aside for a moment. From the basket you take a flat wooden paddle, a simple tool with a wide blade and a short handle that you use for scooping, and you slide the blade under the pile of sweepings and lift it into the basket with a single smooth motion. The straw and dust settle into the basket with a faint rustle, and you tamp it down lightly with the paddle before returning to the broom. You move along the side wall now, the one that runs parallel to the row of perches, and you sweep the open floor space with the same patient rhythm. The straw here is less disturbed, still lying fairly evenly from when you spread it the day before, but there are small drifts of dust and a few stray feathers that have migrated across the room on the gentle currents of air from the ventilation slits. You catch these with the broom and add them to your growing windrow, which you push slowly ahead of you like a shepherd moving a flock. The broom strokes are long and even, each one overlapping the last by a few inches, so that no spot is missed, and your body moves with the work in a gentle, swaying motion that is almost like walking in place. The only sounds are the shush of the broom, the soft crackle of straw, and the occasional rustle of a bird resettling on its perch. When you reach the area beneath the peregrine's perch, you slow down and use the same careful short strokes you used under the merlin. The peregrine has dropped a few more feathers in the night than the others, and you gather a small handful of soft grey down, and a single longer flight feather that lies across the straw like a quill pen. The flight feather is slate blue with faint barring, and you pause for a moment to look at it, turning it in the grey light to see the iridescent sheen along its edge. Then you place it gently in the basket and continue your sweeping. You scoop the pile with the wooden paddle, pressing it down into the basket, and move on. The goshawk's area is the last to be swept, and by the time you reach it, the basket is nearly half full. The goshawk, being the largest bird, produces the largest mutes, and you attend to these with the same calm, matter-of-fact care. You scrape the stone clean with the edge of the paddle where necessary, and you check that the straw beneath her perch is still fresh enough to remain in place. It is, so you leave it and simply sweep the loose material from the surrounding floor. The broom strokes continue, one after another, the rhythm so steady that it becomes a kind of quiet meditation, your mind free to drift while your hands perform the familiar work. When the entire floor has been swept and all the sweepings gathered and transferred to the basket, you set the broom and paddle aside and carry the basket to the door. You will empty it later, in the midden pile behind the Mews, where the sweepings are composted for the garden. For now, you simply set it outside the door in the corridor, where it will wait until your next trip out. Then you return to the Mews and close the door, and the room feels immediately cleaner, the air somehow fresher now that the night's accumulation has been removed. The next task is the straw. You walk to the small storeroom that adjoins the Mews, a narrow space that is barely more than a closet carved into the thickness of the wall, and you open its low wooden door. Inside, a burlap sack of fresh straw waits, the sack rough and prickly against your hands as you untie the twine that holds it closed. The straw inside is clean and dry. The stalks are pale gold that smells sweetly of the summer fields where it was cut. You take a generous armful and carry it back into the Mews, then kneel on the stone floor beneath the goshawk's perch and begin to spread it. The spreading of fresh straw is a simple, satisfying task. You take handfuls of the dry stalks and shake them loose over the swept stones, letting them fall in a random pattern that covers the grey with a warm golden layer. You work from the back of the Mews toward the door, moving on your knees with the pile of straw beside you, and you spread it evenly, not too thick and not too thin, just enough to provide a clean, soft surface for the bird's feet, and to absorb any moisture. The straw crackles and rustles as you handle it, releasing its sweet, grassy scent into the air, and your hands become coated with a fine dust that is not unpleasant. When you reach the door, you have covered the entire floor with a fresh layer, and you stand and brush the loose straw from your knees and the front of your tunic with a few brisk sweeps of your palms. The sand tray beneath the peregrine's perch requires attention now. This tray is a shallow wooden box filled with fine, dry sand from the riverbank, and it serves a specific purpose. The peregrine, like many falcons, prefers to cast his mutes into sand, and the tray keeps the area clean and makes it easy to sift out the waste. You kneel beside the tray and take up the small sieve that hangs from a nail on the wall nearby, a circle of fine brass mesh fitted into a wooden frame. You work the sieve through the sand with a gentle circular motion, scooping up a portion and sifting it, letting the clean sand fall back into the tray while the clumped particles remain in the mesh. These you tap into the basket you have brought back inside, and then you sift another portion and another until you have worked through the entire tray. The sand that remains is clean and dry, and you level it with the flat of your hand before adding a fresh handful from the clay jar that sits beneath the tray. The stone walls of the Mews are next. You take the broom again and use the tip of the twigs to brush lightly along the surface of the stones, reaching up toward the low ceiling beams and down along the corners where the walls meet the floor. The brushing dislodges a few cobwebs, their delicate grey strands drifting downward like ghostly lace, and you sweep them into the basket, along with the dust that has settled on the stones. You pay special attention to the ventilation slits, making sure that their edges are clear and that no debris has accumulated in the narrow openings, because the flow of air is important for the bird's health. You test the wooden shutters that slide across the slits, moving them back and forth to ensure they operate smoothly, and you adjust them to let in a little more of the morning air, which now carries the faint, far-off scent of kitchen smoke. The perches themselves are the last part of the cleaning. You approach each perch in turn, starting with the goshawks, and you run your bare palm slowly along the top surface, feeling for any splinters or cracks that might have developed. The padded leather is smooth and intact, the felted wool beneath it still springy and resilient, and the wood of the perch block is solid and free of any damage. You check the base where the perch post meets the floor, making sure the post is still firmly seated in its stone socket, and you give it a gentle shake to confirm it is stable. The peregrine's perch receives the same inspection, and you find it equally sound. The merlin's perch is smaller and lighter, and you lift it carefully with the bird still on it, just enough to sweep away a few stray pieces of straw that have lodged beneath the base. The merlin shifts her weight at the movement, but does not stir from her stillness, and you set the perch back down with care. Everything is clean now. You stand in the center of the mews and look around at the space you have tended, the fresh golden straw on the floor, the brushed walls, the clean sand tray, the orderly perches with their 3 still, hooded occupants. The mews is not just a room. It is a small, self-contained world of stone and wood and feather and straw, and it is in perfect order. The grey light has shifted again, becoming a little warmer, a little more golden, and you know that the sun is now fully above the hills and shining on the castle's upper walls, though the mews will remain cool and dim for hours yet. You take a slow, deep breath, filling your lungs with the clean, sweet smell of the fresh straw and the quiet animal scent of the birds, and you feel a deep, wordless satisfaction that is not pride, but something closer to contentment, a sense of alignment with the slow, steady rhythm of the morning. In the corner of the mews, where the light from the high window falls in a soft, pale rectangle across the stone floor, there is a low wooden stool that you use only for the quiet seated work of maintenance. You cross to this stool now, your steps slow and your feet muffled by the fresh straw, and you lower yourself onto the seat with the same calm economy of motion with which you do everything here. The stool is a simple 3-legged affair of birchwood, the seat hollowed slightly by years of use, and it creaks once as your weight settles, a small sound that is immediately swallowed by the silence. Beside the stool, against the wall, rests a wooden chest of no great size, its lid bound with iron straps, and its clasp a simple hook that you lift with one finger. This chest is where you keep the tools and materials of your leather craft, and opening it now releases a smell that is one of your oldest and most familiar comforts, the rich, warm scent of neatsfoot oil, the clean sharpness of new leather, the dusty sweetness of beeswax, and the faint metallic tang of brass and iron. You lift the lid fully and let it lean back against the wall, and the contents of the chest are revealed in the grey gold light. There are spare jesses coiled into neat loops, strips of tanned leather of varying widths and colours, a ball of waxed linen thread the size of a small apple, 2 needles in a bone case that has been carved with a simple pattern of interlocking circles, a small oar with a wooden handle darkened by sweat, a tin of neatsfoot oil sealed with a tight-fitting lid, a lump of beeswax wrapped in a scrap of linen, a few spare swivels and leash clips, and a folded piece of soft dew-leather that you use for mechaniking. Each object rests in its own place, and you know the arrangement so well that you could find anything in complete darkness. You reach first for the goshawk's equipment, which hangs on a wooden peg driven into the wall near the chest. A set of spare jesses and a leash that you rotated out a few days ago. The leash is a strip of dark brown cowhide about the width of your smallest finger, and you lay it across your lap and run your hand along its entire length, feeling the texture and the temper of the leather. Near the stitching at one end it has become slightly stiff, the leather losing some of its suppleness from repeated exposure to the damp morning air and the warmth of the bird's leg. You flex the stiff section between your fingers, bending it back and forth gently to test how deep the dryness goes, and you decide that it needs a light application of oil. You set the leash aside on your knee and reach for the tin of neatsfoot oil, prying off the lid with your thumbnail and releasing a scent that is fatty and mild, like the memory of a kitchen long cleaned. You dip just the tips of 2 fingers into the oil, which is pale and viscous and cool, and then you rub those fingers together to warm the oil slightly before you begin. You take up the leash again and work the oil into the stiff section with slow circular motions, your fingertips pressing the oil into the grain of the leather and spreading it outward in a thin, even film. The leather darkens slightly as it absorbs the oil, shifting from a dull brown to a deeper, richer hue, and you feel it soften under your touch, becoming pliable and smooth. You continue the circular rubbing until the oil has been fully absorbed, and then you wipe away any excess with a clean linen scrap, leaving the surface with a soft, matte sheen. You check the stitching along the entire leash, a double row of waxed linen thread that holds the folded leather in place, and you find every stitch intact, the thread still strong, and the holes unenlarged. Satisfied, you coil the leash loosely and set it back on the peg. The goshawk spare jesses are next, and you take them down one at a time. Each jess is a thin strip of leather, not quite as wide as your fingernail, and about the length of your hand from the base of your palm to the tip of your middle finger. You hold the first jess up to the light and examine it carefully, turning it to catch the pale glow from the window. The leather is a warm tan color, and the small hole at the tip is round and clean, not stretched or torn. You slide the jess between your thumb and forefinger, testing for any hidden cracks or weak spots, but the leather is sound. The second jess is the same, and you lay them both aside on the lid of the chest. Now you turn your attention to the merlin's equipment, which requires the most delicate handling because of its small size. You take down the tiny anklets from their hook, each one a circle of soft doe leather, no thicker than a petal and no larger than a ring that would fit a child's finger. The merlin has been wearing these anklets for several weeks, and you inspect them closely for signs of wear where the jesses attach. One of the holes has become slightly elongated, the leather stretching from the constant gentle pressure of the bird's movements. You take a needle from the bone case and thread it with a short length of waxed linen thread. Then you pierce the leather just beside the old hole and draw the thread through with a steady, even pull. The needle makes a faint popping sound as it passes through the leather, and the thread follows with a soft whisper. You make a tiny, tight stitch that reinforces the edge of the hole, and then you make another stitch beside it, and another, until you've created a new firm eyelet that will hold the jess securely. When you are finished, you snip the thread with a small pair of iron shears that lie in the chest and press the stitches flat with your thumbnail, and the repaired anklet looks neat and strong. You do the same for the second anklet, and then you set them aside with the goshawk's jesses. The bells are next, and you reach into the chest for the small leather pouch in which they are kept. The pouch is soft and much handled, and when you loosen its drawstring and tick the contents into your palm, 3 tiny brass bells roll out, each one the size of a thumbnail and shaped like a perfect sphere with a slit across the bottom and a small attachment loop at the top. The bells are for the bird's legs, a way of hearing their movements when they are in the field, and each bell has a slightly different note, so you can tell which bird is flying by the sound. You take the first bell and hold it up to your ear, shaking it gently with a tiny flick of your wrist, and a high, clear note rings out, pure and sweet, lasting for a second before fading into silence. You shake it again, listening for any dullness or buzz that might indicate a crack or a piece of dirt inside, but the note is true. You polish the bell with a scrap of soft cloth, rubbing the brass until it gleams faintly in the grey light, and you check the attachment loop for any sign of wear. The second bell receives the same attention, its note slightly lower, a soft mellow tone that reminds you of distant sheep bells on a hillside. The third bell is the smallest of the three, and its note is the highest, a tiny bright ping that seems to hang in the air like a single drop of water. All three bells are sound, and you return them to their pouch one by one, drawing the string tight and setting the pouch back in the chest. You now reach for the swivels, those small brass mechanisms that sit between the gisses and the leash, preventing the leash from twisting into a tangled knot as the bird moves. There are several spare swivels in the chest, and you select one that you noticed felt slightly stiff when you used it last. The swivel consists of two small rings joined by a central rivet, and the rings are meant to spin freely and independently of each other. You hold the swivel up and try to turn one ring with your finger, but it resists, moving only with a gritty, halting motion. You take the tiny brass object and examine it closely, and you see that a small amount of dust and old oil has accumulated in the joint where the rivet passes through. You take a dry linen scrap and fold it into a thin corner, then work the corner into the crevice of the swivel, twisting it gently to dislodge the debris. A tiny fleck of dark grit falls onto your lap, and then another, and when you try the ring again it moves more smoothly, but still not perfectly. You add a single drop of neatsfoot oil to the joint, touching the tip of a needle to the oil tin, and then transferring the drop to the exact spot where the rivet enters the brass. You work the ring back and forth many times, the motion gradually becoming silkier with each pass, until at last the two rings spin independently with a smooth, effortless glide that makes no sound at all. You set the clean swivel aside and check two others, finding them both in perfect working order, their rings spinning freely and the rivets tight. The hoods require attention now, and you rise from the stool and walk to the perches to collect them. You begin with the goshawk, and you make the soft clicking sound to announce your presence before you reach for her hood. You loosen the braces with your usual slow care and lift the hood away, and the goshawk blinks at you with her deep orange eyes, her expression utterly calm. You leave her unhooded, for now, because she will need the hood later for her training flight, and it is good for her to spend some time in the light. You move to the peregrine and remove his hood as well, and he shakes his head once, a quick, comical motion that makes his feathers puff out for a moment before he settles. The merlin is last, and when you unhood her, she gives you a long, steady look with her bright black eyes, as if she is examining you just as carefully as you examine her equipment. You leave all three birds unhood and carry the three small hoods back to your stool by the chest. You sit down again and take up the goshawk's hood first, turning it over in your hands to examine it from every angle. The hood is a beautiful object made of soft calf leather that has been shaped and stitched to fit the contours of a goshawk's head exactly, with a small plume of dyed feathers on top that are more for the falconer's tradition than for any practical purpose. You turn the hood inside out, carefully peeling the leather back over itself to reveal the soft lining, a layer of fine, smooth chamois that cushions the bird's head and prevents the leather from rubbing. You inspect the lining for any signs of wear, any thin spots or loose threads, but it is still plush and intact. You brush away a few tiny feather particles that have lodged in the seam with a dry, soft, bristled brush from the chest, and then you turn the hood right side out again. The braces are the next focus, two thin strips of leather that run from the back of the hood down to the drawstring that tightens the hood around the bird's neck. You check that the braces are firmly stitched and that the drawstring slides smoothly through its channel, and you give the string a gentle pull to confirm it operates without catching. The hood is in excellent condition, and you set it aside on your knee. The peregrine's hood is newer, made only a few months ago, and the leather is still a slightly paler shade of brown, not yet darkened by handling. You inspect it with the same methodical care, turning it inside out to check the chamois lining and brushing away any debris. The stitching on this hood is still fresh and tight, the threads unworn, and the plume is a neat little spray of soft grey feathers that match the peregrine's own plumage. You test the braces and the drawstring and find them perfect. The merlin's hood is the smallest, a tiny thing that fits easily in the palm of your hand, and you handle it with the same gentle attention you give to the bird herself. The leather is old and soft, darkened to a deep brown, and the chamois lining is slightly compressed from years of use, but it is still clean and smooth. The little plume, no larger than a thumbnail, is a tuft of soft brown feathers that have begun to fray slightly at the edges, and you make a mental note to replace it before the next hunting season, though there is no hurry. With all three hoods inspected and brushed, you return them to their birds. You rise from the stool and walk to the goshawk first, and she watches you come with her steady orange gaze. You hold the hood before her for a moment, letting her see it, and then you slide it gently over her head, easing the braces into place and tightening the drawstring just enough to hold it secure without pressure. The goshawk accepts the hood with the same calm she has shown all morning, and when the darkness returns, she settles immediately, her body relaxing into its familiar stillness. You re-hood the peregrine next, and he chirps once, a soft, questioning sound, before the hood slips over his eyes and quiets him. The merlin is lost, and she dips her head slightly as you approach, almost as if she is helping you, and the tiny hood fits over her head with a precision that is deeply satisfying. You return to your stool in the open chest, and you take a moment to look over everything that remains. The spare leather strips are neatly rolled and tied with twine. The waxed thread is wound tightly around its wooden spool. The needles are safe in their bone case. The awl is sharp and clean. You pick up the awl and test its point against the pad of your thumb, finding it needle sharp, and then you wipe it with an oily rag and return it to its place. You check the tin of neatsfoot oil and find it still half full, enough for many more months of maintenance. You check the small lump of beeswax and find it clean and fragrant. Everything is in order, and you close the lid of the chest with a soft thud that echoes faintly in the quiet mews. You remain seated on the stool for a little while, your hands resting loosely on your thighs, and you look around the room with a slow, unhurried gaze. The goshawk stands on her perch, hooded and still, her breast rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The peregrine has tucked one foot up into his feathers and seems to be dozing. The merlin is fluffed against the cool air, a tiny ball of feathers with a hooded head. The fresh straw lies golden on the floor, the stone walls are brushed and clean, and the air is calm and cool. Your fingers carry the faint, oily scent of neatsfoot, and the dry, clean smell of leather, and your body feels quiet and settled. The maintenance is complete, and the tools are ready for another day, and the birds are comfortable and well equipped. You sit in the soft grey light and let the silence hold you, a falconer at rest in the heart of the castle Mews, with nothing more pressing than the slow steady beat of the morning. The light through the high window has shifted while you sat on the stool, and you notice the change without looking directly at it, a warming of the air and a softening of the shadows that tells you the sun has climbed high enough to clear the outer curtain wall. The pale grey rectangle on the stone floor has taken on a faint golden hue, the colour of weak honey or old parchment, and the dust motes that drift in its beam are now visible as tiny floating points of light. This is the hour when the goshawk flies, the time of morning when the air is still cool but the light is strong, and you feel the quiet pull of the routine drawing you up from the stool and toward the next task. You rise slowly, your knees straightening and your back unfolding, and you stand for a moment beside the closed chest, with your hands resting at your sides. The mews around you is calm and orderly, the birds still hooded on their perches after the maintenance session, and the smell of fresh straw and clean leather hangs in the air. You turn toward the wall near the door where your falconry gloves hang from their pegs, a row of 3 gloves of different weights and thicknesses, each one shaped by years of use to the contours of your left hand. You select the thickest one, the glove with the reinforced cuff that extends halfway up your forearm, its leather surface cross-hatched with tiny pale scars from countless talon grips. The glove is cool and heavy as you take it down, and you slide your left hand into it slowly, working each finger into its proper stall and tugging the cuff snug around your wrist. The lining is smooth and warm from the ambient air, and the glove settles onto your hand with the familiarity of a second skin. You flex your fingers inside the leather, testing the fit, and then you turn to the wooden shelf where the training equipment is kept. The light training line, a length of fine but strong hemp cord about 30 paces long, is coiled neatly and hangs from a peg. You lift it down and feel the slight weight of the coil in your gloved hand, the cord dry and smooth, and smelling faintly of the sun-dried field where the hemp was grown. You check the line for any tangles or weak spots by running it slowly through your fingers, the entire length passing across your palm with a soft, whispery sound, and you find it sound and ready. At one end of the line, a small brass swivel is tied with a tight knot that you examine and then retighten with a gentle pull. At the other end, a loop of leather allows you to secure the line to your glove or to a ground stake. You attach the swivel end to the ring on the goshawk's spare leash, the one you have prepared for this purpose, and then you tuck the cord line under your arm and turn toward the goshawk's perch. She is waiting exactly as you left her, hooded and still, her large body balanced on the padded perch with the poise of a creature that knows the morning routine as well as you do. You make the soft clicking sound with your tongue, that small, familiar signal, and then you reach for her hood. Your right hand works the braces with a slow, gentle pull, loosening the leather and lifting the hood away, and the goshawk emerges from the darkness, blinking and calm. Her deep orange eyes take in the mews, the light, and then your face, and she shifts her weight on the perch, a subtle tensing of her muscles that is not nervousness, but readiness. You offer your gloved fist at the level of her legs, and she steps onto it with a single smooth motion, her talons wrapping around the padded leather and her weight settling onto your arm with a solid, living pressure that is both heavy and reassuring. You bring your fist up to chest height and hold it steady, feeling the slight sway as she balances, and for a moment you simply stand there, the two of you, a falconer and a bird, in the quiet morning light. You carry her to the small side door at the far end of the mews, the door that opens not into the corridor but directly into the enclosed garden between the inner and outer walls. This door is lower and narrower than the main entrance, its timber darkened by damp and age, and the iron latch is cold and rough under your right hand. You lift the latch and push the door open with your shoulder, and the outside air flows into the mews in a cool, fresh wave, bringing with it the scent of wet grass, damp stone, crushed chamomile, and the faint, far-off sweetness of the apple tree that grows against the south wall. You duck your head slightly to pass through the low doorway, and then you are outside, the garden opening around you like a small private world. The enclosed garden is a long, narrow space, no wider than 20 paces across and perhaps 50 paces in length, bounded on one side by the inner curtain wall and on the other by the outer wall of the castle. The walls are high and made of the same grey stone, their tops crenellated and their faces covered in patches of pale green lichen and the brown skeletons of old ivy. The ground is grass, rough and uneven, kept short by the grazing of the kitchen's few sheep in the summer, and at this early hour it is still heavy with dew. Every blade of grass holds a tiny crystal drop, and as you walk across the garden the dew soaks into the leather of your boots, darkening the brown to nearly black around the toes and heels. The air is cool and still, the kind of cool that carries the memory of night but promises the warmth of the day to come, and the sky above is a pale washed blue with a few high clouds that are touched with pink and gold along their edges. You walk slowly toward the center of the garden, choosing the open space where the grass is flattest and the approach to the walls is clearest, a spot you've used for this purpose 100 times. The goshawk rides on your fist, her head turning left and right as she takes in the open sky and the garden walls, her pupils contracting and expanding as she adjusts to the brightness. You can feel her attention sharpening, her body becoming more alert, and you know she understands that this is the place of flight. You stop walking and plant your feet firmly on the damp ground, turning slightly so that the sun is at your back and the bird faces the widest part of the garden. You hold your fist at chest height and let the coiled training line hang loosely from your gloved hand, the cord trailing on the grass in a lazy curve. The goshawk leans forward slightly, her body angling into the air, and her wings lift away from her sides just a fraction, the feathers parting to catch the morning breeze. She is eager but not frantic, her eagerness a controlled, patient thing that matches your own calm. You raise your fist a little higher, giving her a better platform, and you look at her with a steady, quiet gaze. Then you give the release command, a low, soft whistle that is almost a breath, a sound that means the sky is hers. She pushes off from your fist with a powerful downward stroke, her wings driving into the air with a muffled whump that you feel as much as hear. The training line unspools from your gloved hand in a smooth, steady stream, the hemp cord paying out without a single snag or tangle, and you turn on the spot to watch her, moving with her so that the line remains slack and never tugs. She climbs a few feet into the air with 2 more strong wing beats and then levels off, settling into a slow rising spiral that follows the contour of the garden walls. Her flight is not a hunt, not a chase, not any kind of urgency. It is simply the exercise of wings, the maintenance of muscle and instinct, a calm and purposeful movement of feather and bone against the pale morning sky. You watch her circle the garden in a wide, lazy arc, her wings outspread and her tail fanned to catch the shifting air currents that rise from the sun-warmed stones. Each wing beat is slow and deliberate, a deep, rhythmic pulse that seems to match your own breathing, and the space between her wing beats is a long, gliding silence in which she floats without effort. The training line arcs gently behind her, a thin dark curve against the grey stone and the blue sky, and you pay it out with small automatic movements of your hand, giving her more line as she climbs higher and reeling it in slightly when she descends. The line is a connection between you, a physical link that allows her to fly freely while remaining tethered to your care, and the sensation of it moving through your gloved fingers is as familiar as the feel of the stool beneath you, or the weight of the water bucket. The garden around you is utterly still except for the sound of the goshawk's wings. The herbs that grow in tangled profusion along the base of the walls, the chamomile and rue and lavender and sage, release their scents into the air as the morning warms them, and the whole garden smells of green and silver and calm. A few bees move among the chamomile flowers, their buzzing a low, continuous hum that blends with the whisper of the falcon's passage through the air. The apple tree in the corner, old and gnarled and heavy with small green fruit, casts a dappled shadow on the grass that shifts slowly as the sun climbs. You see all of this without looking at it directly, your attention fixed on the bird, and yet your awareness wide and diffuse, taking in the whole peaceful scene. The goshawk completes one full circle of the garden and begins another, this one slightly wider and higher, and you turn slowly on the spot to keep her in view. The dew on the grass soaks through your boots, and you feel the cool dampness against your feet, but it is not uncomfortable, just another sensation in the quiet tapestry of the moment. Your arm holding the line is steady, your shoulder relaxed, and you let the cord slip through your fingers with an ease that comes from long practice. The goshawk tilts her wings and catches a small updraft, rising effortlessly 10 feet in a single smooth motion, and then she levels off again and continues her slow, spiraling patrol. She is not flying away, not trying to escape, not testing the limits of the line. She is simply exercising her body in the way that falcons have done since before castles were built, and you are simply there to ensure her safety while she does it. The flight lasts only a few minutes, a brief interval of calm movement that stretches time into something elastic and soft, and then you decide that it is enough. You raise your gloved fist higher and give the recall signal, a single clear note that cuts through the garden air. The goshawk hears it and responds immediately, her wings tilting and her body turning in a smooth banking curve that brings her back toward you. She descends in a shallow glide, the training line falling slack behind her as you reel it in with quick, smooth pulls of your hand, and she approaches your fist with the precision of long practice. Her wings flare at the last moment, breaking her speed, and then her talons reach forward and grip the padded leather with a firm, gentle pressure. She lands on your fist as softly as a falling leaf touches still water, her weight settling and her wings folding against her sides in a single fluid motion. There is no stumble, no awkwardness, only the perfect practiced completion of a small, shared act. You bring your fist close to your chest and look at her, and she looks back at you with her calm orange eyes. Her breathing is slightly quickened from the flight, her breast rising and falling in a faster rhythm, but she shows no sign of stress or exhaustion. You reach into the small pouch at your belt, where you placed a few pieces of meat before leaving the mews, and you take out a single morsel of beef heart. You hold it near her beak, and she takes it with the same delicate precision she always shows, swallowing it in one quick motion. This is her reward, not a bribe, but a completion of the contract between you, and she accepts it as a matter of course. You give her a second small piece, and a third, and then you stroke her breast feathers lightly with the back of your gloved finger, a gesture of quiet affection that she tolerates with the patience of a creature that trusts its keeper completely. The garden remains still and peaceful around you, the bees still humming among the chamomile and the apple tree still casting its slow shadow, and you stand for a little while longer with the goshawk on your fist. You look up at the sky, now a clear soft blue with the high clouds thinning and fading, and you feel the sun on the back of your neck, a gentle warmth that has chased away the last of the dawn chill. The flight is over, the morning's main task complete, and the rest of the day stretches ahead in a long, unhurried line. But you do not think about the rest of the day yet. You simply stand in the garden with the bird, the training line coiled loosely at your feet, and you let the quiet settle around you like a blanket. When the goshawk's breathing has slowed and her body has relaxed back into its usual stillness, you turn and carry her back toward the small side door. Your boots squelch softly on the wet grass, leaving dark footprints that will dry and vanish as the sun climbs higher, and you duck your head again to pass through the low doorway into the dim, cool interior of the mews. The air inside is noticeably cooler than the garden, and it smells of straw and leather and bird, the familiar, comforting smell of your domain. You carry the goshawk to her perch and lower your fist, and she steps off with the same smooth precision she has shown all morning, her talons finding the padded wood and gripping it securely. You rehood her with slow, gentle movements, sliding the soft leather over her head and tightening the braces just enough, and she settles into stillness with a soft ruffle of her feathers. You coil the training line carefully, looping it around your hand and elbow in a figure-8 pattern that prevents tangles, and you hang it back on its peg near the door. You remove the thick glove and set it on its own peg, flexing your bare fingers in the cool air, and then you stand in the center of the mews and look around. The peregrine and the merlin are still hooded on their perches, exactly as you left them, and the morning light from the high window has shifted again, now a warm gold that catches the dust motes in a slow, drifting dance. Everything is in order, the flight complete, the partnership renewed, and you feel the quiet satisfaction of a small duty perfectly performed. The mews is silent, the castle is waking beyond the walls, and you are exactly where you should be. The small side door closes behind you with a soft, muffled thud, and the cool dimness of the mews wraps around you like a familiar garment after the bright, open air of the garden. The goshawk is still on your fist, her breast rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm that has returned to its resting pace, and you carry her across the fresh straw toward her perch with the same measured steps you always use. The other two birds are hooded and still, the merlin a tiny puff of feathers on her small perch, and the peregrine standing on one foot with the other tucked into his breast, both of them exactly as you left them. The mews is quiet except for the soft rustle of your boots on the straw and the faint, rhythmic whisper of the birds breathing. A silence so deep that it seems to have a texture, a weight that presses gently against your ears. You stop before the goshawk's perch and hold your fist at the level of the padded wood, and she steps off with the same smooth, precise motion she has shown all morning, her talons gripping the leather-covered perch and her body settling into its familiar posture. You reach for her hood, which hangs from its small hook on the wall beside the perch, and you hold it before her for a moment so that she can see it, a calm acknowledgement of what is coming. Then you slide it over her head with gentle, practiced hands, easing the braces into place and tightening the drawstring just enough to hold the hood secure without the slightest pressure against her feathers. She ruffles once, a full-body shake that travels from her head to her tail, and then she is still, a statue of patience and trust. You run your bare finger lightly down the soft feathers of her back, a small gesture of quiet thanks, and then you turn away from the perch. Now you cross to the small desk that stands near the main door, a simple piece of furniture you built yourself from a single oak plank during a long winter when the snow lay deep against the castle walls and the birds needed less exercise. The desk is not large, barely wide enough to hold a codex and an ink pot and a quill, and its legs are slightly uneven, requiring a small wedge of wood under one corner to keep it steady. You have grown accustomed to its slight tilt over the years, and you no longer notice it. You pull out the stool that sits beneath the desk, a low three-legged seat of birchwood that matches the one by the maintenance chest, and you sit down with a slow automatic motion. The stool creaks once, a familiar companionable sound, and then it is silent. On the desk rests a thin codex of vellum pages bound with a length of twisted twine, its cover a plain piece of calfskin that has been darkened by handling and by the faint residue of tallow smoke from the candles. Beside the codex sits a small clay ink pot with a fitted cork stopper, and beside that lies a quill cut from a goose feather you found near the moat last autumn. The quill is a warm grey-brown, its barbs trimmed away from the shaft for a hand's length to create a smooth grip, and its nib is cut to a fine, precise point that you sharpen regularly with a small knife. A scrap of linen for wiping the quill lies folded beside the ink pot, and a small dish of fine sand for blotting the wet ink completes the arrangement. Everything is exactly where you left it, waiting in the patient dimness. You reach forward and lift the cover of the codex, letting it fall open to the current page. The vellum is smooth and cool under your fingers, its surface slightly glossy from the burnishing of pumice that the parchment replied when it was made, and it catches the grey-gold light from the high window with a faint, pearly sheen. The pages that have already been filled with writing lie in a soft, thick stack under your left hand, each one covered in the small, neat script that you have developed over years of daily record-keeping. A script that is not elegant, but is clear and steady. The current page is half empty, waiting for today's entry, and you smooth it flat with the heel of your palm before you reach for the quill. You take up the quill and hold it lightly between your thumb and forefinger, finding the balance point that has become as familiar as the grip of your glove. Then you remove the cork from the ink pot, setting it aside on the desk, and the smell of the ink rises to meet you, a sharp earthy scent of oak, gall, and iron, and a trace of gum arabic that is both acrid and clean. The ink is a dark, lustrous black in the pot, its surface reflecting the light like a tiny pool of still water. You dip the nib into the ink with care, drawing it against the inner rim of the pot to remove the excess, and then you hold the quill poised above the vellum. The first words you write are the date, according to the saint's calendar that the castle chaplain maintains and announces each morning at the chapel service you rarely attend. Today's the feast of a minor saint, a name you write without thinking, the letters forming themselves automatically under your hand. The quill moves across the vellum with a soft, scratching sound that is the only noise in the Mews, apart from the subtle whisper of feathers being preened, a sound so familiar that it is almost silence. You write the date in full, the day and the month and the year of our Lord, and then you pause and lift the quill, looking across the room toward the birds. The goshawk is motionless, her hooded head slightly bowed, her talons gripping the perch with a relaxed, secure hold. The peregrine has shifted his weight and now stands on both feet, his head turning slightly under the hood, as if he is listening to the sound of your writing. The merlin is a tiny, fluffed ball of brown and buff, completely still, her breathing so shallow that she seems almost to be carved from wood. You watch them for a long moment, noting their postures and their calm, and then you turn back to the codex. You write the weather next, describing it in plain, factual terms, clear and cool with a light north wind. The sky a pale blue with high, thin clouds, the morning dew heavy on the grass. You add that the sun rose clear and that the garden was still and pleasant for the training flight. These details are not poetic. They are the observations of a person who works outdoors and whose charges depend on the weather, and they are recorded for the practical purpose of tracking patterns across the seasons. You note that the wind was from the north, which brings cool, dry air, and that the goshawk flew well in these conditions, rising easily on the thermals that form near the sun-warmed castle walls. Now you begin the individual notes on each bird, and you start with the goshawk as you always do. You write that she flew this morning, that her flight was strong and steady, and that she completed 2 full spirals of the garden without any sign of fatigue or distress. You add that she took the recall instantly, and that she landed on your fist with her usual precision, a detail that you note with quiet satisfaction, but without embellishment. You record that she ate her full portion at the morning feeding, all the beef heart and the piece of day-old chick, and that her crop was soft and full afterward, a sign of good appetite and digestion. You note that her mutes were normal in color and consistency, white and black in the proper proportions, and that her feathers are sleek and unruffled. There is no sign of any illness or injury, and her weight feels steady and appropriate on your fist. You write all of this in short, clear sentences, the quill moving steadily across the page. You pause again and look up at the goshawk, and as if she senses your attention, she shifts her talons on the perch, a tiny adjustment that makes the leather creak faintly. You watch her for a moment longer and then return to your writing, dipping the quill into the ink pot once more, because the nib has begun to run dry. The ink flows again, dark and even, and you turn your attention to the peregrine. The peregrine's entry is shorter, because he did not fly today, but you still record his condition with the same care. You note that his weight is steady, measured by the way he feels on your fist during the morning greeting, and that his appetite was strong at the feeding. You write that his mutes were normal, and that the sand tray beneath his perch showed no sign of any digestive upset, the sand clean and easy to sift. You add that his feathers are in good condition, the slate blue plumage smooth and the barring on his breast crisp and clear, and that his eyes were bright and alert when you removed his hood for the maintenance check. You note that he chirped once during the rehooding, a soft, questioning sound that you have come to recognize as his particular vocal signature, and that he settled quickly afterward. There is nothing of concern to report. The Merlin's entry is the third and last, and you begin by referencing the note you made 2 days ago. A brief line that mentioned a slight whistle in her breath during the morning feeding. Today you write that the whistle is no longer audible, that her breathing is clear and silent, and that her nares are clean and unobstructed. You add that she ate all her food with her usual quickness, and that her tiny crop was full and soft afterward. You note that her mutes were normal, small and compact, and that her feathers are in good order despite her age. You record that she preened one of her talons after the feeding, a small businesslike action that you find endearing, and that she remains bright-eyed and alert. There is no sign of any return of the breath whistle, and you allow yourself a quiet, private sense of relief that you do not write down, but simply feel. You add a final line about the Mews itself, noting that the floor was swept and fresh straw spread, the sand tray sifted, the perches inspected, and the leather equipment oiled and repaired where necessary. You record that the ventilation slits were checked and adjusted, and that the door to the garden was opened for the training flight, then closed again. These details are mundane, but they are part of the whole, the complete picture of the morning's work, and you include them with the same matter-of-fact tone. The quill continues to scratch across the vellum, the sound steady and rhythmic, and you find yourself moving in a slow, calm rhythm that matches the pace of your breathing. Between sentences you pause and look toward the birds, watching their stillness, listening to the quiet sounds of their presence. The peregrine has tucked one foot up into his breast feathers again, a posture of deep rest. The merlin has turned her head slightly under her hood, as if she is listening to something far away. The goshawk has not moved at all. The light from the high window has shifted again, the golden rectangle now stretching a little farther across the floor, and the dust motes dance in its beam with a slow, hypnotic drift. You reach the bottom of the current page and pause, reading over what you have written. The script is even and legible, the ink a uniform dark black, and the observations are clear and complete. There is no emotion in the words, no commentary or reflection, just the plain record of a keeper who has watched his birds carefully and noted what he saw. You let the ink dry for a moment, waiting with the quill held loosely in your hand, and you look across the Mews at the row of perches. The birds are calm, the straw is fresh, the air is cool and clean, and the morning is unfolding exactly as it should. You feel a quiet sense of completeness, a feeling that is not pride, but something deeper and more still, something like alignment with the slow, patient rhythm of the day. When the ink has dried to a dull, matte finish, you sprinkle a small pinch of the fine sand from the dish over the page, tilting the codex gently so that the sand rolls across the surface and absorbs any last trace of moisture. Then you tip the sand into your cupped palm and return it to the dish, brushing the page clean with the side of your hand. The writing is now set, permanent and unsmudged, a small piece of the Mews' history preserved on the vellum. You close the codex with a soft, careful motion, settling the cover over the pages and smoothing it flat with your palm. The twine binding creaks faintly, and the book rests on the desk like a sleeping creature. You take up the linen scrap and wipe the quill nib clean, drawing it through the folded fabric with a gentle twisting motion that removes every trace of ink. The nib emerges clean and sharp, and you examine it briefly to ensure it has not been damaged. Then you lay it back in its place beside the ink pot. You replace the cork stopper in the ink pot, pressing it down with a firm, steady pressure until it seals the opening and will keep the ink from drying out through the rest of the day. The cork is smooth and cool under your fingers, slightly stained with old ink, and it fits the pot exactly. You set the ink pot back in its accustomed spot, and then you fold the linen scrap and place it beside the quill. Everything on the desk is now tidy and orderly. The codex closed, the quill clean, the ink sealed, the sand dish covered with a small wooden lid that keeps out dust. You rest your hands on the edge of the desk for a moment, looking at the small, neat arrangement, and then you rise from the stool with a slow, easy motion. The stool scrapes faintly against the stone floor as you push it back under the desk, and then it is still. You stand in the quiet mews, your hands at your sides, and you look around at the space you have tended all morning. The birds are at peace, the straw is fresh, the equipment is clean and ready, and the record of the morning is complete, a small, quiet testament to the care you have given. You walk slowly along the row of perches, pausing before each bird to look closely at them one last time. The goshawk is completely still, her large body relaxed, and her breathing deep and even. The peregrine has turned his head towards you under his hood, as if he knows you are there, and you see his talons flex once on the padded wood before he settles again. The merlin is a tiny feathered sculpture, her fluffed plumage making her look larger than she is, and you can just see the gentle rise and fall of her breast. All is well. The record-keeping is finished, the book is closed, and the quiet dialogue with the passing of time and the health of the birds has been renewed for another day. You stand in the center of the mews, a falconer at rest, and you let the calm, patient silence of the morning hold you in its gentle, steady hands. The morning has advanced while you sat at the desk, the sun climbing above the castle walls and the light through the high window shifting from pale gold to a warmer, fuller yellow that now reaches almost to the center of the mews floor. You rise from the stool and stretch your arms slowly, a gentle unfolding of your shoulders and elbows that sends a pleasant, mild ache through the muscles that have been still during the writing. The birds remain at rest on their perches, the goshawk motionless, the peregrine with one foot still tucked into his breast, the merlin, a tiny puff of feathers in the far corner. You look at them each in turn, a slow sweep of your gaze that confirms their continued calm, and then you turn toward the small wooden bucket that hangs on its hook near the main door. The bucket is empty now, the few inches of water you drew before the feeding long since used for washing your hands and rinsing the linen cloths. It is a simple, sturdy vessel made of oak staves bound with 2 iron hoops, its handle a loop of rope that has been spliced and respliced over the years until it is more spliced than original cord. You lift it from its hook and feel its lightness, the dry wood almost weightless in your hand, and you carry it across the mews toward the main door. The latch lifts with a quiet click, and you step out into the cool dimness of the stone corridor, leaving the door slightly ajar behind you so that you will not need to fumble with the latch when you return. The corridor is brighter now than it was before dawn. The narrow ventilation slits high in the wall, admitting thin shafts of daylight that fall across the stone floor in pale diagonal stripes. The air is still cool but no longer cold, and it carries the faint, far-off sounds of the castle waking fully. The distant clang of a pot from the kitchen, the murmur of voices in the great hall above, the rhythmic thump of the blacksmith's hammer from the smithy near the gatehouse. These sounds are muted by the thick stone walls, softened into a gentle background murmur that has no urgency and no claim on your attention. You walk through them as you might walk through a light rain, aware of them, but untouched. Your path takes you along the curving corridor, past the kitchen entrance with its heavy timber door, now propped open a hand's breadth to let out the rising heat from the ovens, and the smell of baking bread pours into the corridor in a warm, yeasty wave that mixes with the cool stone smell of the walls. You pass the storeroom and the alcove with the wooden bench, and then you turn toward a smaller passage that branches off to the right, a narrow tunnel that leads to the outer bailey. This passage is shorter and rougher than the main corridor, its walls unplastered and its floor sloping gently downward, and at its end a heavy door of oak and iron stands open to the morning. You step through the doorway and into the outer bailey, and the world opens around you. The sky is a wide, pale blue expanse overhead. The high clouds of earlier now thin to faint white streaks that are barely visible against the brightness. The sun is warm on your face and hands, a gentle welcome warmth after the cool dimness of the Mews, and you pause for a moment just outside the door to let your eyes adjust. The outer bailey is a broad open space of packed earth and patchy grass, bounded on one side by the high curtain wall and on the other by the inner buildings of the castle, the stables, the smithy, the armory, and the long low storehouses that hold the castle's supplies. A few figures move in the distance, servants crossing between buildings with the slow, steady pace of people who have been working since before dawn and who have hours of work still ahead. You turn left and walk along the base of the curtain wall, following a well-worn path of packed earth that has been trodden by countless feet over the centuries. The path leads to the well, which stands in a small open area near the gatehouse, its stone cylinder rising from the ground like a squat, patient sentinel. The well is ancient, older than the castle itself, some say, and its stones are worn and rounded by weather and time, their edges softened and their surfaces covered in patches of pale green moss. The iron windlass stands on top of the well, its wooden drum wrapped with a thick rope that descends into the darkness below, and a large wooden bucket hangs from the rope's end, suspended over the opening by the tension of the crank. A single figure is at the well when you arrive, one of the kitchen servants, a young woman you have seen many times but whose name you have never learned. She is drawing water into a large clay jug, her hands working the windlass with the practiced rhythm of long habit, and she glances up as you approach and offers a small silent nod of greeting. You return the nod with the same quiet economy, and you stand a few paces back, waiting while she finishes. The windlass creaks as she turns it, a sound that is as old and familiar as the stones themselves, a high rhythmic complaint of wood and iron that carries across the bailey. She fills her jug, hefts it onto her shoulder with a smooth motion, and walks away toward the kitchen, her footsteps fading into the general murmur of the morning. Then the well is yours. You step forward and grasp the windlass handle, its wood worn smooth by the grip of 1,000 hands over the years, and you begin to release the crank. The handle turns in your grasp with a steady, controlled motion, and the rope unwinds from the drum, lowering the bucket into the well. You hear the bucket descend, its wooden sides bumping gently against the stone walls of the shaft, the sound growing fainter and fainter until at last, far below, you hear the hollow splash as it strikes the water. You let the rope go slack for a moment, allowing the bucket to tip and fill, and then you reverse your grip and begin to wind it back up. The winding is slow, steady work, your arm turning the handle in a circular rhythm that matches the pace of your breathing. The rope tightens, and the drum creaks, and the bucket rises from the darkness, inch by inch, its weight growing as it climbs. You can feel the water inside it, a shifting, living weight that tugs against the rope, and you adjust your grip on the handle to compensate. The bucket emerges from the well mouth with a final creak of the windlass, its sides streaming with cold, clear water that drips back into the shaft with a soft, musical plinking. You reach out and steady the bucket with your free hand, then carefully tip it so that you can pour the water into your own smaller bucket without spilling. The water is cold and clear, so cold that it chills the wood of the bucket immediately, and it smells faintly of deep stone and ancient earth, a clean, mineral scent that is the smell of the castle's foundations. You pour until your bucket is nearly full, leaving just enough space at the top so that the water will not slosh over the rim as you walk. Then you release the well bucket back over the shaft and let the windlass unwind slowly, lowering it back to its resting place. The handle turns in reverse, the rope hanging out, and the bucket descends into the darkness with a series of soft, echoing bumps. When the rope goes slack, you set the crank and step back from the well, your bucket heavy now in your hand, the weight of the water, a solid, reassuring presence. You turn and begin the walk back toward the Mews, but you take a slightly different route this time, one that brings you past the kitchen entrance. The kitchen door is still propped open, and the warmth and the smell of baking bread pour out into the bailey with an intensity that makes your stomach stir, a quiet, gentle reminder that you have not yet eaten. You stop at the threshold and wait, and after a moment a kitchen boy appears, a lad of perhaps 10 years with flour dusted across his tunic and his hair standing up in a tousled shock. He recognizes you, as all the kitchen staff recognize the Falconer, and he disappears back into the steamy warmth without a word. A moment later he returns, carrying a small linen-wrapped parcel that he holds out to you with both hands. You take the parcel and thank him with a quiet word, and he bobs his head once and vanishes back into the kitchen. The parcel is warm in your hand, the linen slightly damp from the steam of the kitchen, and you can feel the shape of the bread and cheese and hard-boiled egg inside, the same simple meal that the kitchen provides for you every morning. You tuck the parcel into the crook of your arm beside the bucket handle, and you continue your slow walk back toward the Mews. The passageway is cool and dim after the brightness of the bailey, and you blink several times as your eyes adjust to the lower light. Your boots make soft scuffing sounds on the worn stone floor, and the water in the bucket sloshes gently with each step, a quiet, rhythmic accompaniment to your walking. You pass the storeroom and the alcove and the kitchen door again, now from the other side, and the smell of bread follows you for a few steps before fading into the general cool stillness of the corridor. The main door of the Mews stands ajar, exactly as you left it, and you push it open with your shoulder and step inside. The Mews is quiet and dim and welcoming, the air cool and still and smelling of straw and leather and the clean, honest presence of the birds. You carry the bucket to the preparation area and set it down beside the stone basin, the water sloshing once and then settling. Then you take the linen parcel to your stool near the maintenance chest and sit down, placing it on your lap and untying the twine that holds it closed. The linen falls open, revealing a small loaf of brown bread, a wedge of pale yellow cheese, and a hard-boiled egg with a shell the color of old parchment. The bread is still slightly warm from the oven, its crust crisp and its interior soft and dense. and it smells of wheat and yeast and the faint, nutty scent of the stone ground flour. The cheese is firm and slightly crumbly, its edges beaded with tiny droplets of moisture, and it has a mild, salty scent. The egg is warm in its shell, and you cup it in your palm for a moment, feeling the heat soak into your skin. You eat slowly, sitting on the stool with your back against the cool stone wall and your eyes resting on the row of perches. You tear a piece of bread from the loaf and place it in your mouth, chewing with a slow, steady motion that allows you to taste the full, simple flavor of the grain. The bread is dense and satisfying, and you follow it with a small bite of cheese, the saltiness cutting through the wheat flavor and leaving a clean, bright taste on your tongue. You peel the egg carefully, tapping the shell against your knee, and then picking away the fragments with your thumbnail, and you eat it in 3 slow bites, the yolk rich and creamy, and the white firm and smooth. Between bites you pause and look at the birds, watching their calm, still postures, and you let your mind drift without direction. When the meal is finished, you fold the linen cloth and set it aside. The kitchen boy will collect it later, when he brings the evening's meat. You rise from the stool and return to the preparation area, where the bucket of fresh water waits. You pour some of the water into the stone basin, filling it halfway, and then you take down the 3 shallow clay saucers that serve as drinking vessels for the birds. Each saucer is a simple dish of unglazed red clay, wide and flat, and you rinse them one by one in the basin, swishing the cool water around and then pouring it out onto the straw, where it will evaporate slowly through the day. You refill each saucer with fresh, clean water from the bucket, pouring carefully so that the water does not spill over the low rims, and then you carry them across the mews. You place the first saucer near the goshawk's perch, setting it on the straw where she can reach it easily when she is unhooded later. The saucer is small beneath her large talons, but she knows its purpose and will drink from it when she needs to. The second saucer goes near the peregrine, and the third near the merlin, each one placed in the same spot as always, each one filled with the same cool, clear well water. The birds do not react to your movements. They are hooded and resting, and the water will wait for them until they are ready. You return to the preparation area and wash your hands in the basin, scrubbing away the crumbs and the faint residue of cheese with a scrap of linen and a small lump of lye soap. The water is cool and clean, and it feels good against your skin after the warmth of the Bailey and the meal. You dry your hands and then pour the remaining water from the basin down the stone drain, watching it swirl and vanish into the darkness below. You empty the last of the bucket into the basin for later use, and then you hang the bucket back on its hook near the door, the wood now damp and cool. The mews is quiet and orderly, the fresh water waiting in the saucers, the birds resting on their perches, the straw golden on the floor, and the light from the high window now a warm, steady gold that fills the room with a soft, even glow. You stand near the door for a moment, looking back at the peaceful scene, and you feel a quiet, settled calm that is the cumulative effect of the morning's small, completed tasks. You pull the door open a little wider, letting a gentle draught of fresh air flow into the mews, and you lean your shoulder against the doorframe and look out into the garden, where the bees still move among the chamomile, and the apple tree casts its slow, dappled shadow. The morning is half gone now, the sun well above the walls, and the rest of the day stretches ahead in a long, unhurried line. But there is nowhere else you need to be, and nothing else you need to do, and so you simply stand in the doorway and let the quiet, peaceful rhythm of the Mews hold you. The sounds of the castle's full waking begin to reach you in the doorway, carried on the mild air that drifts through the garden and slips past you into the Mews. They are not loud or sudden, but arrive as a gradual thickening of the quiet background, a slow accumulation of distant human and animal noises that have been present all along, yet only now become distinct. The blacksmith's hammer starts up in the smithy near the gatehouse, a steady, rhythmic clang that rings across the bailey with a bright metallic note, each strike following the last by the space of a drawn breath. It is a sound you have heard 1,000 times, so familiar that it barely registers as separate from the silence, blending instead into the texture of the morning, like the hum of bees or the rustle of leaves. You lean your shoulder against the cool stone of the doorframe and let the sound wash over you, without any need to identify its source or its purpose. From the kitchen chimney, now fully active, a column of pale grey smoke rises into the blue sky, and the smell of burning oak and the faint savoury scent of a broth being started drifts across the garden. Somewhere above you in the inner ward, a servant calls out to another about linens, her voice high and clear, but softened by the distance into a musical, wordless call that hangs in the air for a moment and then fades. You hear the distant bray of a mule from the stables, a long complaining note that rises and falls and ends with a snort, followed by the lower, gentler lowing of a cow in the byre. These animal voices are part of the castle's daily music, and you hear them without listening, your mind still wrapped in the calm of the Mews. The rooster that called before dawn has long since fallen silent, his duty done, and the songbirds in the garden have settled into the quieter, more sporadic calls of mid-morning. Despite all these sounds, the Mews itself remains a pocket of quiet, its thick stone walls absorbing the noise of the waking household and transforming it into a distant, muffled murmur that does not disturb the birds. Inside, the goshawk stands motionless on her perch, her hooded head slightly bowed, and the peregrine has not moved except to resettle his feathers once. The merlin, tiny and fluffed, looks like a small brown stone balanced on the padded wood, and the fresh straw on the floor glows a soft gold in the light from the high window. The water in the clay saucers is still and clear, the surface reflecting the pale ceiling beams like small dark mirrors. You turn your head and look back into the room, scanning each perch and each corner with a slow, careful gaze, confirming that everything is as it should be, that the morning's work has left the Mews in a state of quiet perfection. You push yourself away from the doorframe and step back inside, your boots making a soft, muffled sound on the fresh straw. The door remains ajar, letting a gentle current of fresh air flow into the room, and you cross to the small brazier in the corner that has been burning low all morning. The brazier is a squat iron basket on short legs, its interior filled with the grey-white ash of spent wood and a few remaining embers that glow a deep, dull orange when you stir them with the iron poker. You do not need the brazier now, and the birds do not require its warmth, so you bank the embers by pushing the ash over them with the flat of the poker, covering them completely until no glow is visible. The fire will sleep through the rest of the day, and tomorrow morning you will stir the embers back to life with a few sticks of kindling, the same routine repeated across the years. The iron of the poker is warm in your hand, and you return it to its hook on the wall with a quiet, precise motion. You turn to the preparation table, where the bone-handled knife and the wooden cutting board lie clean and dry from your earlier washing. You take up the knife and run the edge lightly across the whetstone a few times, the soft, hissing sound of steel against stone filling the quiet for a moment, and then you wipe the blade with an oily rag and return it to its place on the shelf. The cutting board you wipe down with a damp cloth and lean against the wall to dry. The clay dish that held the morning's meat is empty now, and you rinse it in the stone basin, scrubbing away any remaining traces with a scrap of linen, then set it upside down on the table to drain. The 3 small feeding bowls, still bearing the faint scent of raw meat despite their washing, are stacked neatly on the lower shelf, their carved surfaces catching the light. Everything on the table and the shelf is tidy and ready for the evening's preparation, and you run your hand over the clean, smooth wood of the tabletop, feeling the worn grain under your palm. The maintenance chest is closed, its lid latched, and the stool sits beside it in its usual spot. You walk past it and cross to the desk, where the codex lies closed and the ink pot is sealed, the quill clean and the sand dish covered. You touch the cover of the codex lightly with your fingertips, a brief absent gesture, and then you turn away. The desk will wait, its contents safe and dry, until tomorrow morning, when you will open the book again and add another entry to the long, quiet record of the Mews. You make a final round of the perches, walking slowly from the goshawk at the near end to the merlin at the far end, your steps measured and your hands clasped loosely behind your back. At each perch you pause and look closely at the bird, checking for any small sign that might have escaped your earlier inspections. The goshawk's breathing is deep and even, the rise and fall of her breast a slow, rhythmic tide, and her talons grip the padded wood with a relaxed, secure hold. You run your hand lightly down her back, feeling the smooth, cool feathers and the warmth of her body beneath them, and you feel the slow, steady beat of her heart, a faint, distant pulse that matches the calm of the room. She stirs slightly at your touch, shifting her weight once, and then she is still again. At the peregrine's perch, you observe that he has tucked his head under his wing, a posture of deep, comfortable sleep that you rarely see in the daytime. His slate-blue back feathers are sleek and unruffled, and his breathing is so shallow that it barely moves his body. You do not touch him, not wanting to disturb his rest, and after a moment you move on. The merlin, when you reach her, opens one bright black eye under her hood, as if she senses your presence despite the leather covering. You speak a soft, formless murmur, the same calming tone you used at first greeting, and she closes her eye again, a tiny body relaxing into stillness. You look at her for a long moment, this small old falcon who has been with you through so many seasons, and you feel a quiet, wordless affection that you do not need to name or express. The light through the high window has shifted once more, the golden rectangle on the floor now longer and paler, and the dust motes have ceased their dance. You walk to the window and adjust the wooden shutter, sliding it slightly to reduce the opening, because the sun will grow warmer as the day progresses, and the Mews should remain cool. The shutter moves easily under your hand, its wood smooth and dry, and it settles into its new position with a soft, firm click. The small tallow candle that you extinguished earlier still sits on its shelf near the goshawk's perch, a stub of pale wax with a charred, curled wick. You pick it up and turn it over in your fingers, feeling the slight warmth that lingers in the wax from the morning's flame, and then you set it back down. It will serve again tomorrow, its life extended by the slow, careful burning you practice, and you will light it in the dark hour before dawn, when the cycle begins anew. You walk to the main door and pause with your hand on the iron latch, taking one last look at the Mews. The three birds are still. The straw is fresh and golden. The water in the saucers is clean and clear, and the air is cool and calm. The room is not just a workplace. It is a sanctuary, a small pocket of order and quiet in the vast, busy castle, and you are its keeper. You feel a deep, quiet satisfaction that is not pride, but something simpler and more still, something like the feeling of a stone settled firmly in the earth. You lift the latch and pull the door open fully, letting in the bright, warm light of mid-morning, and you step out into the corridor, pulling the door closed behind you, but leaving it slightly ajar so that the fresh air can continue to flow through the Mews. The corridor is no longer dark. The sunlight has found its way through the ventilation slits and fills the passage with a soft, even illumination that reveals every rough stone and every worn flag on the floor. You stand outside the Mews door for a moment, your hand resting on the rough timber, and you listen to the distant sounds of the castle. The blacksmith's hammer still rings, the kitchen clatter has grown louder and more varied, and somewhere a child laughs, a high, bright sound that echoes off the stones. The world of the castle is fully awake now, and you are a part of it, but you carry the quiet of the Mews with you, a calm center that will remain until you return. You walk slowly along the corridor, your steps unhurried, your hands loose at your sides. You pass the kitchen entrance, where the double doors now stand fully open, and the warmth and the steam and the busy noise spill out into the corridor in a cheerful, chaotic wave. A kitchen maid glances up as you pass and gives you a brief, friendly nod, and you return it with a small inclination of your head before continuing on. You pass the storeroom and the alcove with the empty bench, and you climb the stone steps that spiral upward toward the great hall, though you do not enter the hall itself. Instead, at the top of the stairs, you turn down a shorter passage that leads to the inner ward, a wide, open courtyard surrounded by the castle's main buildings. The inner ward is bright with sunlight, the sky overhead a clear soft blue, and the grass that grows in the center is dotted with small white daisies that have opened their petals to the sun. A few servants cross the ward on errands, their arms full of linens or firewood, and a pair of guards in simple padded tunics stand talking quietly near the gatehouse. The great stone keep rises on the far side of the ward, its walls warm and golden in the morning light, and the banners hanging from the upper windows stirred gently in a breeze that you cannot feel. You walk across the grass feeling the soft turf under your boots, and you find a spot near the wall where a low stone bench sits in the sun. You sit down, your back against the warm stone, and you stretch your legs out before you, letting the quiet of the morning settle into your bones. You have no particular destination now, no urgent task waiting. The Mews is cared for, the birds are fed and watered and calm, the records are written, and the equipment is ready for another day. Your shift is complete, and the hours until evening stretch before you in a long, unhurried line. You will rest now, perhaps doze here in the sun, perhaps walk down to the village later to buy a new length of leather cord from the tanner, perhaps simply sit and watch the clouds move across the sky. None of it is pressing, none of it is urgent, and you feel no need to plan or decide. You are a falconer, and your life follows the slow, steady rhythm of the birds and the seasons, a rhythm that has no use for haste. As you sit on the bench, your eyes half closed against the brightness of the sun, You let your thoughts drift back to the Mews, to the three still, hooded birds standing on their perches in the cool dimness. You picture the goshawk's deep orange eyes, the peregrine's quick, questioning chirp, the merlin's tiny, bright gaze. You picture the fresh straw on the floor, the clean water in the saucers, the codex closed on the desk, the brazier banked asleep. And you know, with a quiet, bone-deep certainty, that before dawn tomorrow you will rise from your bed in the small stone chamber, pull on your wool tunic and your boots, light the candle from the embers, and walk through the dark corridor to the Mews. You will open the door and greet the birds, and the whole quiet cycle will begin again, unchanged and unchanging, as steady and reliable as the turning of the stars. The blacksmith's hammer pauses for a moment, and a brief, deep silence falls over the ward, filled only by the distant cooing of doves from the dovecote. Then the hammer resumes, and the silence is gone, but the peace remains. You close your eyes and let the sun warm your face, feeling the weight of the morning's work in your limbs, not as a tiredness, but as a quiet, pleasant heaviness. The castle stirs around you, the world goes about its business, and you sit in the center of it all, a falconer at rest, content and calm, and exactly where you should be.